my brain with that kind of nuance, that kind of specificity. So if I'm thinking large
those there.
Yeah, exactly.
Searching for.
I
But
need to
that's,
think
I
about
can't
script.
get on there, so I'm using my official.
With
Without the password and all that stuff.
So I don't know, that got two different universities. I know less about it. I know more. Yeah. And that will, how we look at that shit. I need to know that. Yes.
Professor. This is. Okay, thank you. So we'll take one.
Eğitim süreçlerinde bizim geçtiğimiz eğitim modeli Türkiye'de profesyonelliğinde kesinlikle yani online şu an artık dünyada infografik performansı için içerisine girdiğini çok hızlı atlamak zorunda da.
Online bu zamanda deneyimlerimiz konfer yayın başladıkça sınav uyarı oluyor. Hocam konferanslar pandemiden beri
Sizin ilk konferans değil mi?
Sağ olun.
pandemiden beri
Seslenelim.
Eğitim dergisi var.
Maalesef uygulama çok daha kolay. Salon ihtiyacı, fiziksel ihtiyaçlar hepsi için çok daha kolay.
Başlayabilir miyiz? Shall we start? Başlayabilir miyiz? Shall we start? İrfan 1-2 saniye sonra geliyor. Ne yapayım buradan sesi bir şey yapalım. Başlayabilir miyiz? Konuşayım. İrfan 1-2 saniye sonra geliyor. Ne yapayım buradan sesi bir şey yapalım. Buradan burasını bir kapatalım. Konuşayım. Burasının sesini. Bak. Buradan. Bak daha ne zaman geliyor benim sesim.
Buradan bunun kalması gerekiyor mu? Kapalı. Bunun sesini kapatalım. Ses kapalı ama.
Burada bence Zoom'u komple kapatalım.
Yani gerekli onu soruyorum. Gerek var mı?
Yok, leave de. Tamam. Şimdi tamam. Konuşun
Ama
bir.
keynote yaparken.
Bu canlı yayın oradan basacaklar hocam. Sıkıntı yok.
Ha,
Profesyonel
tamam,
broadcast
tamam,
sistemleri var
tamam.
onların.
Tamam. ARUCAD'da gurur duyuyoruz. First, I will speak in English, then Turkish. This time only I know two languages, English and Turkish. I hope in the future, Carlos, you will teach me Portugal language. Welcome to INTE and ITICAM conferences. First of all, I would like to thank ARUCAD University, Ibrahim Hocam. Thank you. Thanks a lot. And also thank you, Dr. Elmas, because we start these conferences together. He's always there to support us. I know he's my big supporter. And Teresa, thanks a lot. She's always with us. Doc, thank you. Doc is always there, not behind of me, near, Thank you, Carlos, my friend. This is Carlos raise his same meaning in Turkish. So I always tell Carlos, you are Turkish. Half Portuguese, half Turkish. Susan, thank you. Thank you for coming from all the way from Washington, D.C. Thanks a lot. Değerli hocalarım, sizlere de çok teşekkür ederiz. Biliyorsunuz, as you know, conferences are hybrid, online and face to face, but I just talked to Doug. Higher Education Journal talks about the issue of online conferences. I hope we will come back to face. Hocam, İbrahim Hocam, çok teşekkür ederim. Bizleri burada misafir ettiğiniz için, üniversitenin imkanlarını bizlere sunduğunuz için çok teşekkür ederim. Mütevelli heyetimize de çok teşekkür ederim. Sayın Rektörüme de, Vehbi Hocama da çok teşekkür ederim. Dekanımıza da, İletişim Fakültesi dekanımıza sağ olsun bizimle birlikte çalıştık. Diğer arkadaşlara da, bütün ARUCAD camiasına çok teşekkür ederiz. Tabii bildiğimiz bu konferansları biz 12 yıl önce başladık. Her geçen gün arttı ama pandemiden sonra maalesef sayılar da azalmaya başladı. Mesela bu konferans için biz 160'a yakın makale aldık. Bilim Kurulu 67 tanesini kabul etti. 2 gün boyunca keynote'larımız var. Workshop'larımız var. Hocam Teresa ve Doug kalite konusunda workshop'lar var. Eğer kalite ekibinde ilgilenen arkadaşlar olursa workshop'lara katılabilir. Keynote'larımız olacak. Carlos Portekiz'den var. Amerika'dan yine bir tane daha keynote'umuz var online. Malezya'dan bir tane konuşmacımız var. Susan yine keynote'u var. Teresa'nın ve Doug'ın hem keynote hem workshop, atölye çalışmaları var. Yoğun bir program 2 gün boyunca. 7'de bitiyor programımız. Çünkü niye 7'de bitirmek zorunda kaldık? Amerika ile saat farkımız var. 4'te mesela burada 4 oldu, orada 8'de ikna edemedik. Sabah 6'da kalkın diye. Olmayınca da yani 7'ye kadar buralardayız hocam. Sizin misafiriniz. Yarın da sabah 8'de bildiri sunumlarımız başlıyor. Sabahtan Ece hocam onu getiriyoruz sabah oturum başkanlığı için. Sabah 8'de burada olabiliriz değil mi hocam? Tamam. Mehdi hocamı da nerede? Ona da verdik oturum başkanlığı. You will be here 8 o'clock, or you don't need to be here. You know, you can join through online Zoom. I mean, you know, we will explain how to do that. Okay, thank you. Hocam, herkese çok teşekkür ederim. Ben konuşmalarını yapmak üzere İbrahim hocamı buraya davet ediyorum. Çok teşekkür ederim.
Sayın rektörler, rektör ve rektör yardımcıları, sayın dekanlar ve çok değerli akademisyenler, seçkin bilim insanları ve misafirler, sevgili öğrenciler. Bu yıl 8.si düzenlenen Uluslararası Eğitimde Yeni Ufuklar Konferansı INTE ve Uluslararası İletişim ve Medyada Eğilimler ve Sorunlar Konferansı ITICAM'a hoş geldiniz. ARUCAD olarak bilimsel bağlamda oldukça değerli bu iki konferansa ev sahipliği yapmak ve hepinizi burada misafir etmek bizler için büyük bir zevk ve onurdur. Her ne kadar uzun süredir devam eden pandemi süreci tam anlamıyla sona ermemiş olsa da, bunu umuyoruz tabii bir an önce sona ermesini ve fiziki koşullar anlamında eskiye dönebilmeyi, henüz sona ermemiş olmasa da INTE 2022 ve ITICAM 2022 konferansları vesilesiyle fiziki olarak da, bir taraftan hibrit devam ediyor gerçi ama fiziki olarak da bir araya gelebilmiş olmamız bizler için oldukça mutluluk verici. INTE ve ITICAM konferanslarının bizler için bir diğer önemi de aslında COVID-19 sürecinde, pandemi sürecinde yeni ufuklar ve modeller geliştirilmesi konusunda en dinamik adımların atıldığı, en köklü değişikliklerin olduğu iki alan aslında bir eğitim, diğeri de iletişimdi bizce. Bu alanları, bu iki alanı, bu iki disiplini kapsam olarak içeriyor olması bu konferansların bizler için oldukça mutluluk verici. Bildiğiniz üzere bilgi çağının etkinliğini farklı boyutlarda artırarak hissettirdiği günümüzde eğitim alanında artık yeni yaklaşımlar geliştirme ihtiyacımız olduğu bir gerçek. Ve bu noktada öğrenci odaklı eğitim anlayışının yanı sıra fiziki ve coğrafi şartlara bağlı kalınmaksızın bütünlüklü bir eğitim modelini geliştirmek biz akademik kurumların hem yakından takip ettiği hem de çalışmalar yaptığı bir alan. Dileğimiz aslında öncelikle INTE konferansından başlayarak burada gerçekleştirilen çalışmalarla bilgi ve teknoloji çağının bir diğer etkisi de olan bilgi iletişim olanaklarına erişimde yaşanan eşitsizliğin ortadan kaldırılarak örgün eğitim süreçlerinin dahil olmasına, oralara empoze edilmesine ve gerçekleştirilmesine katkı koyacak çalışmaların bu konferanslar kapsamında yeni ufukların geliştirilmesi ve çalışmaların ortaya koyulmasına katkı koyması, İnsanoğlunun varoluşundan başlayarak aslında kendini gerçekleştirmesinin yegane olgusu olan iletişim, içinde bulunduğumuz çağ içerisinde, belki biraz da bu anlamda subjektif konuşuyorum iletişimci olarak ama hem bireysel hem de kurumsal bağlamda oldukça yaşamsal bir önem arz etmeye başladı. Ve şunu biliyoruz ki iletişim özellikle pandemi sonrası dahil olduğumuz süreçte giderek farklılaşarak farklı modeller içerisinde hem bireyin hayatında hem de kurumların hayatlarında onların varoluşları noktasında anahtar bir rol oynayacak. Bir iletişimci olarak ben ITICAM konferansının iletişim ve medya alanları ile ilgili geleceğe de ışık tutacak çalışmalar bırakmasını arzu etmekteyim. ARUCAD henüz genç bir üniversite, aslında 4 yıllık bir üniversite ve biz ARUCAD'da bu geride bıraktığımız butik bir üniversite gözlemlemişsinizdir diye düşünüyorum. Butik bir üniversite. Bu geride bıraktığımız 4 yıl içerisinde kendinden emin adımlarla öğrencilerimizi sorgulamaya teşvik etmek, onları bilimsel araştırmaya olanak tanıyan bir akademik ortam sunarak bütünlüklü bir gelişimi gözeten bir üniversite. Bu süreçleri gerçekleştirirken bununla birlikte hem öğrencilerimizin hem akademisyenlerimizin bilimsel ve sanatsal çalışmalar gerçekleştirerek öncelikle içinde bulunduğumuz bölgenin, yakın coğrafyamızın, sonrasında da daha geniş kapsamın hem sanat hem akademik ortamına katkı koymak ve Kıbrıs adasını da tekrardan yeniden kültürel bir kavşak konumuna taşıma noktasında çalışmalar yapmaktayız. ARUCAD akademisyenleri nitelik olarak, büyük nicelik olarak belki daha yolun başında bir üniversite olarak 2021-22 akademik yıl içerisinde 29 uluslararası yayın gerçekleştirmiş ve daha niceleri için çalışmalar yapmaktadır. bizim amacımız, niyetimiz bu anlamda sayıları da niteliksel olarak değeri de hızlıca yükseltip ARUCAD'ı da hak ettiği, planladığı noktaya getirmektir. O yüzden bugün sizleri burada ağırlamak o açıdan da bizim için çok çok önemlidir. Bizler ARUCAD olarak sanat, tasarım ve iletişim disiplinlerinin geçişken niteliklerinden yararlanarak çağın gereksinimlerine yanıt verecek şekilde yaratıcı, eşitlikçi ve yenilikçi bakış açısına sahip bir yüksek öğrenim ortamı yaratmayı arzulamaktayız. Ve bunu yaparken de kültürel ve entelektüel açıdan topluma katkı koymayı hedeflemekteyiz. Bu bağlamda INTE ve ITICAM konferanslarının da ilgili alanlarda hem akademik hem de bilimsel açıdan katkıda bulunacağını umut ediyorum. Bu organizasyonların gerçekleşmesini sağlayan organizasyon komitesine de teşekkür ederim. Tüm katılımcıların ve konuklarımızın üniversitemizde ve adada iyi zaman geçirerek verimli ve başarılı bir konferans geçirmesini temenni ederek teşekkürlerimi sunuyorum. Very shortly I will say something in English. We are very happy and honored to have you here. Welcome to the island and to our university also. We do hope you're going to have a very efficient conference and meeting here. And it's we are really proud to have you here. Thank you.
Now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Muzaffer Elmas to give his speech. Şimdi benim eski rektörümü, eski başkanımı, Gökak başkanımızı ve yeni rektörümüzü, KOSTÜ rektörümüzü, doğru söylüyorum değil mi hocam? KOSTÜ rektörümüzü buraya davet ediyoruz. Kendisini tabii kalite konusunda ben ilk tanışalı bir 30 yıl oldu hocamla. O zamandan beri yılmadı, hep kalite ve Sakarya Üniversitesi yapan, belli bir noktaya getiren hocamın büyük çabaları oldu. 8 yıl rektör yardımcılığı, 8 yıl rektörlük, bir de son 4 yılda YÖKAK Başkanlığı, Türk Yüksek Öğretimine büyük damgası oldu. Ben hocama, tüm akademisyenler adına çok teşekkür ederim. Buyurun hocam.
Sağ olun hocam.
Ya tamam.
Ben de hepinize hayırlı sabahlar diliyorum. Tabii Aytekin hocam benden bahsedince ben de ondan bahsetmek durumunda kalıyorum mecburen. Bir kere tabii yenilikçi yaklaşımlarıyla gerçekten bu zamana kadar bu düzenlediği organizasyonlar birlikte Amerika'daki bu Higher Learning Commission toplantılarına bir 13-14 sene birlikte katıldık. Tabii bizlere çok değer kattı. O bakımdan hani kendisine ben de teşekkür ederim. Bir de tabii şöyle düşünüyorum. Yani seçtiği konular bu 10 senedir süren bu toplantıları, konferansları pointer şu mu? Pointer yok mudur? Buradan mı kumanda edeceğiz? Tamam, buradan edelim. Şimdi tabii bu konferansları 10 senedir, 12 senedir yürütmekte olduğu bu konferanslarda seçtiği konular günümüzün gerçekten ışık tutan konuları. Yani 2010'larda, 11'lerde çok anlamı yoktu ama şimdi özellikle bu son yıllarda bu konferans konularının ne kadar önemli olduğunu hepimiz anladık. Yani işte eğitimde yeni ufuklar, yeni arayışlar ki günümüzde artık bunlar günümüzün en önemli konusu. İşte iletişimdeki gelişmeler. Bu da aynı şekilde önemli bir husus olarak karşımıza çıktı. O bakımdan da kutlarım. Ev sahipleri için ARUCAD, değil mi? Yanlış söylemiyorum. Üniversitemize teşekkür ederiz. Çok butik ve güzel bir üniversite oluşuyor burada da. O yüzden tebrik ederiz. Şimdi iki başlık içinde aslında konuşacağız. Daha önce de ki konferansı da konuştuk. YÖKAK Başkanı iken de konuşuyorduk. Daha önce Sakarya Üniversitesi'nde de konuştuk. Benzer şeyleri hep konuşuyoruz. Yani şöyle bir şey oldu dünyada da, ülkemizde de. Yani 2000'li yıllardan sonra bir şeylerin yüksek öğretimde hep değiştiğini gördük. Yani yavaş yavaş değişime başladı. 2010-15'te bu değişim çok hızlandı. Şimdi de bu değişim hızla yukarı gitmekte. Tabii bu değişimden dolayı da en çok nasibini alan kurumlardan biri de yükseköğretim kurumları oldu, üniversiteler oldu. Bugün bu başlığı biraz irdeleyeceğiz. Yani neler değişti, bunlara biraz bakacağız. Bunlarla nasıl baş edebiliriz? Biraz bu konuları konuşacağız. Böyle yarım saate yakın bir süremiz var. Aytekin Hocam sona doğru hatırlatırsa sevinirim. Bu resimde de hani gördüğümüz gibi biz özellikle bu teknolojik gelişmeleri biraz öteleme çabamız vardı. Özellikle biz akademisyenlerde bu görüş vardı. Ya bu yeni icatlar ne işimize yarayacak? İşte biz işimize bakalım. Ders böyle yapılır, şöyle yapılır derken pandemiyle birlikte çoğu teknolojik araçların içine girdik. Girmek zorunda kaldık. İşte yapay zeka gibi, artırılmış gerçeklik gibi robotlar, başka araçlar, başka teknolojiler, işte Zoom'lar, hepsiyle yüzleştik. Dolayısıyla bu bizim için böyle bir katkısı oldu pandeminin. Bunu olumlu sayabiliriz. Olumsuz olacak değil. Aslında yüksek öğretimin de geldiği nokta şu anda değişimden önceki zamanda, yani özellikle 2015'li yıllara kadar burada düz bir yol gibiydi yüksek öğretim. Yani biz bir planlama yaparız, bir eğitim programı yaparız. 5 sene, 10 sene buraya hiç dokunmayız. Arada bir değişiklik olursa ekleriz, çıkarırız falan. Ama son zamanda burada gördüğünüz gibi yeni normalde sürekli bir değişim, dönüşümün içinde olmak zorundayız. Yani bu yol artık kaçınılmaz olarak hepimizin uymak zorunda olduğu bir yol oldu. Eski yoldan giderseniz artık hiçbir yere ulaşamazsınız. Bu alışkanlıkları, bu mantaliteyi değiştirmek, terk etmek zorundayız. Benim 2-3 senedir gösterdiğim bir eğri vardı. Bu eğriyi burada sizlerle tekrar paylaşmak isterim. Şimdi aslında şöyle, bu şurada gördüğünüz teknolojiyle ilgili yeni gelişmeler yıllardan beri olan gelişmeler aslında. Yeni değil. Yani 1 sene, 2 sene, 5 sene önce dikkat ederseniz bazıları 30 yıldır, bazıları 40 yıldır, bazıları 20 yıldır gündemde olan konular. Ama bunların uyumu, insan adaptasyonu gelişmelerle paralel gitmekteydi uzun süre. Fakat 2015'li yıllardan sonra bakın bu değişim yukarı doğru hızla gitmeye başladı. Ve bizim uyumumuz mevcut bilgilerle, mevcut yetişme biçimimizle, mevcut alışkanlıklarımızla buna uymamız imkansız hale geldi. O zaman dendi ki biz bu değişmelere uymak istiyorsak değişime, işte burada bir tanesini gösterdim ama bunlar çeşitli şekillerde ifade ediliyor biliyorsunuz. 10 tane var, 20 tane var. Dünya Ekonomik Forumu'nun bunun yaptığı var. 2020'de farklı, 2025'te farklı beklentiler var. Bunlar gördüğünüz gibi yine bu eğri, bu değişimin de bir anahtarı. Sürekli mesela 2 sene önce olmayan işte bu Dünya Ekonomik Forumu'nun yeni yetkinlikler 2025'i tanımlarken mesela inovatif düşünce ve aktif öğrenme becerileri yeni eklendi mesela bu pandemide. Ama belki 2 sene sonra farklı yetkinlikler eklenecek. O yüzden sürekli değişimin içinde. Yani bunlar sabit bir şey değil. Bazıları hani bunu 21. yüzyıl becerileri diye 4-5 tane sayıp bunlar sanki bir statik bir şeymiş gibi devam ediyor. Burada da gördüğünüz gibi bakın iletişim en önemli, en temel yetkinliklerden biri oldu. Hiçbir zaman hani bazen ikinci, üçüncüsü bunu sıraladığında da ilk sırada yer alan bir beceri. Burada şu var, bu değişimde olmayan işte kurumların, insanların bu değişime ayak uydurabilmesi için 2 tane şeyi yapması lazım. Bir tane şu yetkinlikleri hepsinin kazanması lazım. İletişim yetkinliği, analitik düşünme becerisi, buradaki kritik düşünme, dijital yetkinlik dedim ya, bunları sayabilirsiniz. Bunları herkesin, hem üniversitede okuyanların hem de hayat ve öğrenme kapsamında herkesin. Yani bunun yaşla bir ilgisi yok. Şu anda dünyada ayakta kalabilmenin hangi pozisyonda olursanız yolu bunlardan geçiyor. Bu yetkinlikleri herkes kazanacak. Üniversitede olan üniversitede, üniversiteyi bitirmiş olanlar da Yine üniversitelerin veya sertifika kurslarının bir sürü dünyada bu konuda araçlar var. Bunlarla birlikte bunu kazanacak. Burada hani yine yeni trendler diye yüksek öğretimde yine az önceki söylediğime biraz da benzer bunlar trendler. Artık şu cümleler çok kullanılmaya başlandı. Böyle çakılı işte 2 sene, 4 sene, 6 sene lisans, yüksek lisans, doktora eğitimleri yerine lineer olmayan hayat boyu öğrenmeyi kapsayan eğitimler çok çok öne geçmeye başladı. Daha başka mesela learning outcomes yerine krediler, işte rozetler, sertifikalar yerine geçmeye başladı. Akademisyenlerin bakış açıları bir alana burada görüldüğü gibi bir konunun akademisyeni değil, çeşitli alanlarda özelleşmiş akademisyenler burada yeni gelecekte ortaya çıkmaya başladı. Ben de bunun hep kullanırdım, bir konuşmamda kullandım. Bunu hep söylüyoruz. Biz diyoruz ki şu eğriye baktığımızda bir önceki eğriye zaten değişmesi gereken bizleriz, akademisyenler aslında. Öğrenciler bu değişim eğrisine daha yakın. İşte akademisyenlerin saltanatı bitti diye bir cümle kullanmıştım. Biraz tepki çekti bu. Ya bu akademisyenler saltanat içinden falan. Aslında benim kastettiğim şöyleydi. Hani bir konuyu, bir ders notunu 10 sene, 15 sene anlatabilme artık devri bitti. Sürekli yenilenmezsen karşındaki öğrenciler karşısında mahcup olursun. Aslında kastettiğim buydu ama biraz bunu abarttım. Niye? Çünkü akademisyenler değişime en çok direnen kitle. Yani onlar değişmeden bu işin olmayacağını da ifade etmek isterim. Burada eğitim öğretimdeki değişimi biz planlanmış 4 yıllık diploma yerine işte bunlar daha çok öne çıkmaya başladı. Mesela farklı disiplinlerden kurslar, üniversite ortak seçimli dersleri, mikro krediler, bu Coursera, edX, Microsoft buralarda verilen kursların eğitime sayılması, bir kişinin herhangi bir şekilde kazandığı bir yetkinliği, bu kendi kendine olabilir, online olabilir, yurt dışında dünyanın herhangi bir yerinden aldığı bir kurs olabilir. Burada kazandığı bir yetkinlik kazandım diyorsa ve bunu bölüm başkanlığı ifade ediyorsa işte bir sınavla bunu da sayılabilir gibi. Böyle eğitimin planlamasını temel derslerin dışında, tabii o dersin, bunu da göz ardı etmeyelim, yani her şey seçimli olacak değil. O alanın temel derslerini bir kere mutlaka çok iyi alacak ve bunlarla birlikte eğitimin planı tamamlanmış olacak. Bir de örnek bir konuda vereceğim için biraz geçeyim. Bu da aynı şeyi ifade eden hususlar. Bu da artık hani eğitimin çeşitli araçlarla dünyanın her yerinden her şekilde ulaşılabilen bir şey olduğu. Aynı anda işte bir videoyu izle. Aynı anda mesela ön sıralarda olanlar yapamaz ama arkada olanlar işte hocayı dinlerken dünyanın herhangi bir yerinden bir canlı yayında aynı dersi izleyebilir. Başka yerden blogları takip edebilir. Başka yerden, ya bunlar artık hepsi mümkün. O yüzden önde oturmak artık çok iyi bir şey değil. Biz mecburen önde oturuyoruz yıllardır. O yüzden kötü bir durum yani. Onu söyleyeyim. Bu konuda yine bu eğitimdeki değişim derken bu konudan da birkaç cümle bahsetmek isterim. Burada tabii bu yenilikler çıkınca işte yapay zeka, metaverse falan aslında bir sürü uzman çıkıyor hemen televizyonlara. İşte diyor sanki bu dün gece icat edilmiş gibi. Hatta bu şeyde de oldu, pandemide de oldu mesela. Online eğitim, rektörler falan, hocalar televizyona çıkıyor. İşte online'a başladık, işte şöyle yaptık. Halbuki bu 15-20 senedir olan bir şey. Bu bir süreç. Bu sürecin dışındaysa şaşırmış gibi oldu. İşte yapay zeka, işte yapay zekayı 50 senedir gündemde olan bir husus. Ama son yıllarda, bakın son yıllarda olan bunların hacmi arttı. Hacmi arttıkça birbiriyle etkileşimi arttı. Dolayısıyla yeni araçlar doğdu. Mesela Metaverse de bunlardan biri. İşte yapay zekanın, artırılmış gerçekliğin, işte dizaynın bir araya gelmiş bir kompozisyon. Tabii ilk çıktığında herkes farklı farklı cümleler kurdu. İşte gözlüğü takan, tamam Metaverse işte eğitimi yaptık. İlk başta şöyleydi, hani herkese gözlük takarak bunlar olacak gibi algılandı ama sonradan gözüktü ki bu pek mümkün değil. Bu da bakın yani yakın zamanda 5-6 ayda bu mantalite değişti. Şimdi işte gözlüğü bir kişi taksın ama sanal atmosferler oluşturup sanal platformlar orada avatarlar işte hem sunumu izlesin hem birbiriyle konuşsun hem öyle bir atmosfer oluşsun. İnşallah Aytekin de öyle bir toplantı yapar bence. Bir dahaki toplantıyı böyle yapabilir. Yani çok artık hızla çünkü gelişiyor. Şey yok, çok basitleşiyor. Bu da böyle bir şey. Hani bu da bir araç olarak gündeme girdi. Gelecekte nasıl şekillenir hep birlikte göreceğiz. Bu insanlara yarar sağladıkça gelişen bir şey. O Google Glass'ları biliyorsunuz. Hani çok büyük şeyle çıktı ama şimdi işte pek adından bahsedilmiyor. Yalnız dün bir şey gördüm. Hani siz de görmüşsünüzdür. Bir şey takıyor. Hani kulaklık gibi buralara bir çip yerleştirip işte Google'daki bütün şeyleri siz soruyorsunuz. Kişi cevap veriyor falan. Beyninden çalışıyor. Yani buraya kadar iş ilerledi yani. Yarın hepimizin pabucu da mı atılabilir? O yüzden bu hızı bu da yine farklı bir ifade. Hani bu değişimin farklı bir ifadesi. Şimdi daha önceleri şöyle mesela tarihi bitirdin veya inşaat mühendisliğini bitirdin. İnşaat mühendisi olarak hakkın rahmetine kavuşuyordun. Yani hiç arada bir şey yapma şeyin yoktu fazla. Ama böyle bir dünya artık kalmadı. Yani bunu biliyorsunuz hani artık 5-6 sene 10 sene aralıklarla iş değiştirmek, alan değiştirmek ihtiyacı doğdu. Peki böyle olunca aslında bunun anlamı nedir? Siz 4 yıllık üniversite eğitimi alırken buna yatkın yetişeceksiniz. Yani nasıl olacak? Başka disiplinleri tanıyacaksınız. Başka yetkinlikler olacak ki kolayca başka bir yere adapte olabilirsiniz. Az önce tanıştım işte değerli rektör yardımcılarımız mesela hani bir alanda ama başka alanda kendini geliştirmiş, başka alanda ders veriyor. Ama mesela Türkiye'de hala bir alanda doktora yapmamışsan orada ders veremiyorsun. Yani bu kadar aslında olay geriden takip ediliyor maalesef. Yani bunların da hızla düzelmesi lazım. Çünkü yetkinliklere göre artık iş yapıldığına göre yetkinliği varsa versin. Yani bunda ne mahsuru var? İnşallah bunları biz kırabiliriz. İşte burada da başka bir versiyon bu. İşte çok yetenek, çok farklı yetkinlikte bireyler artık ayakta durabilir. Bu aynı şeyi aslında tekrarlıyorum ama biraz vurgu için böyle değişik değişik resimler gösteriyorum. Yoksa baştan söylediğimiz cümle bütün program yani 30 dakikayı kapsayan bir şey aslında. Şimdi burada da öyle. Benim yine böyle bir benzetmem olmuştu. Bana kızmışlardı. Bu bayramlarda gaziler olur ya resmi geçit yapar. İşte şey gazileri İstiklal şu anda fazla kalmadı ama mesela burada bir şey olur işte çavuştur mesela askerde ama etrafında bir sürü aldığı madalyalar olur. Aslında şey de böyle mesela bir alanı bitirecek bir kişi diyelim ki işletmeyi bitirdi veya iletişimi bitirdi ama yanında yapay zeka sertifikası, işte iletişim sertifikası, işte artırım neyse robotik sertifikası, dijitalleşme böyle olacak. Yani ne kadar çok olursa o kadar çok anlamı olacak artık diye bunu da ifade edelim. Bu az önce söylediğimize biraz örnek. Hani diploma olmadan işe alan dünyada firma bunların sayısı hızla artıyor. Yani bunlar 5-10 taneydi 5-6 sene önce. Şu anda yüzlerce var. Artık diploma yerine kişinin yaptığı yetkinlikleri, daha doğrusu o alandaki yetkinliklerine bakarak alıyor. Geçen örnek vermiştim. Yine iletişim olduğu için onu da hep söyleyeyim. Bu alanda en sorunlu meslek iletişim fakülteleri. İletişimciler. Yani şöyle düşünün siz bir kuruma, hani ben YÖKAK'ta çalışırken de oldu, Sakarya Üniversitesi'nde de oldu, şimdi çalıştığım kurumda da oldu. İletişimci arıyorsunuz, diyor ki ben işte yazı yazarım. Ben diyor halkla ilişkileri bilirim. Halbuki şimdi iletişimci o kadar donanımlı olmalı ki, yani öyle aranıyor zaten. Yani öyle olmadığı zaman kimse işe almıyor. Diploma isterseniz işte en iyi dereceyle mezun olur. O bakımdan yetkinliklerin öne çıktığı şeyler çoğaldı. Bu yetkinlik kazandıran dünyada pek çok biliyorsunuz online kurslar, sertifikalar var. Bunu da geçelim. Burada bazı tanımlar var. Bunu size söyledik. Microsoft'un kursları var. Bunu oynatabilir miyiz? Buradan basınca oynar mı bu? Bu video. Dur bakayım üzerine basın. Evet oynamış. Bunu hani şunun için bunu çok gösteriyorum ama ilgi çekiyor her seferinde. O yüzden bir daha göstereyim. Aslında tüm bunları niye anlatıyoruz biz? Yani biz bir şey olduğunda sanki işte böyle uyanıp dünya yeniden kurulmuş gibi ortaya çıkmayın. Şaşırmayın yani. Daha da olacak. Hani bu eğriye dikkat ederseniz bu sürekli karşınıza çıkacak. O yüzden bunu iyi anlarsanız hani bu değişimi veya iyi kavradığınız zaman bir şeye şaşırmazsınız. O bir değişimin devamı gibi. Kendiniz de kurgularsınız o zaman geleceği. O bakımdan bunu gösterdim. Biz de mesela kendi üniversitemizde ne yaptık? Şu anda bulunduğumuz bir üniversitede 4-5 aydır işte orada yönetici olarak çalışıyorum. Mesela herkese ücretsiz yapay zeka sertifikası, robotik sertifikası, kodlama, işte iletişim sertifikası, dijitalleşme böyle 5-10 tane sertifikayı ücretsiz veriyoruz. Bunu taahhüt ettik. Yani her öğrencimiz bunu alacak. Bunun dizaynını işte seçimli dersler içerisinde koyduk ve her öğrenci bunları isteyen öğrenci alabilecek. Bunu taahhüt ettik. Bu sene başlıyoruz buna. Tabii bu kursların sertifikaların standardı yine bunun için de uğraşılıyor. Yani sizler de farkındasınız. Dünyada çok hızlandı. Amerika'daki üniversitelerde. Avrupa Mikro Krediler diye yeni bir çalışma içinde 2025'e kadar bitirecek. Yani her yerde verilen sertifikanın yani bir ülkede verilen her yerde geçmesini sağlayacak bir kalite güvence sistemi kuruluyor. Bu sistemin özü de zaten yani bir dersin program dizaynıyla hemen hemen aynı zaten. Yani bir dersin öğrenme çıktıları, mikro kredilerin tanımlanır, hocaların yetkinlikleri tanımlanır, dersler tanımlanır ve çıktıları sağlayacak ölçüm yöntemlerinin kalitesine bakılır. Yani bu süreç aynen bir eğitim sürecinde olduğu gibi. Burada bizim yani az önceki örneği bir tekrarlamak istedim somut bir şekilde. Bizde mesela 45-46 tane ders var. Yani 8 yarı yılda düşünürseniz işte bir yarı yılda 5-6 dersten 45-46 tane bir üniversite ders olur. Bunların 30 kredisini işte Türk Dili, İnkılap Tarihi dahil temel dersler ve mesleki dersler. O alana ait. Hangi alansa bu. Bu daha fazla olabilir ama bizim seçtiğimizi söylüyorum. Ben örnek olsun diye bunu verdim. Bu daha az da olabilir, daha çok da olabilir. Seçimlik dersler. 32 tane dersin altındaki 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14 ders gördüğünüz gibi tamamen alan dışında. Mesela bir tanesi başka disiplinlerden alınan en az 4 ders demişiz. Bir öğrenci işte hemşirelikte okuyorsa 4 tane de işte bilgisayardan, diş hekimliğinden, bizde olan bölümleri söylüyorum, işte psikolojiden oradan ders almalı. 2, üniversite seçimli dersleri diye tanımlanan dersler var. Az önce söylediğimiz dersler gibi ve üniversitenin kendi misyonu doğrultusunda yetiştireceği öğrenci niteliğine göre olan dersler gibi. 2 tane de en az bundan alacak. Sonra mikro krediler, sertifikalardan 2 tane. Bu 2 ile niye sınırladık? Çünkü biraz bu işlerin suistimali olduğu için sınırladık. Yani bu işlerde hani biraz yönetilebilir olsun diye sınırladık. İşte Coursera, edX, Microsoft gibi dünyada belirli sertifikasyonlarda verilen kurslardan 2 tane sayıyoruz. Bir kişi az önce söylediğimiz kendi kendine öğrendiği herhangi bir dersi bunu ben yapabiliyorum deyip dilekçe verdiğinde onu sınava alarak 2 tane dersi de öyle sayacağız. Bir de konferanslar vererek mesela 10 tanesine katılana işte 3 AKTS gibi böyle bir uygulama yapıyoruz. Yani bunların alttakilerin tamamen anlamı şu. Yani siz bir bölüme geldiniz ama aslında diğer bölümleri de tanıyın, dünyayı tanıyın. Mezun olduğunuzda kendi alanınızda çalışın, isterseniz başka alana kolayca adapte olun. Dünyada ayakta durabilin diye kendi kendine öğrenmeyi, bireysel öğrenmeyi, yani her şeyin sınıf içinde olup bitmediğini anlatan, yani çok bu tür anlamı olan bir dizayn bu. Bunu bu sene biz de üniversitemizde uygulamaya başlayacağız. Yani hep böyle konuşuyoruz yani ne yapıyorsunuz dediğinde biz de böyle bir şu anda bulduğumuz bir yol olarak gidiyoruz. Bu tabii Türkiye'de çoğu üniversiteler buna cesaret edemiyorlar. Hocalar çok direniyorlar buna ama bence üniversite liderlerinin bu konuda, rektörlerin, işte rektör yardımcıların bu konuda öncü olup bu değişime öncülük etmeleri, liderlik etmeleri gerekiyor. Yoksa bu şekilde bir yere varamayız. Bunu az önce de söyledim. Bu AKTS kavramı var ya Türkiye'de, burada da var değil mi AKTS? Ya aslında normalde bu yalan bir şey. Yani gerçeği olmayan bir şey. Şimdi bunu biz bir de önce bir tutuyoruz. Hani bu yalanı önce bir sabitliyoruz. Sabitlediğimizde sonra buna tapıyoruz. Mesela 249 olsa diyoruz ki mezun olamaz. Ya böyle bir zaten bunun gerçeği hiçbir zaman 170-180'i aşmıyor. Var mıdır aşağı? Yani 240 AKTS demek aslında bir öğrenci bu günlük 8 saat burada çalışıyorsa bunun 2 katı da yani 1 katı da en az 1,5 katı da sonra ders dışı çalışıyor demektir. Ya böyle bir öğrenci var mı? Dolayısıyla bunun gerçeği zaten istatistikler de söylüyor. Yılda 1800 saat yerine 1300'ü 1400'ü bulmuyor. Zaten 50-60 AKTS burada şey aslında sahte yani. Dolayısıyla bunun içine siz bu dersleri koyduğunuzda itiraz edenlere bu açıklamayı yapabilirsiniz. Bazıları itiraz ediyor. Çünkü bunun karşılığını sanki hani bu AKTS'ler düştüğünde bir şey olacakmış gibi burayı muhakkak hani böyle algılamak gerekir. Öyle iyi algılarlarsa koyduğunuz derslere hiçbir şey diyemiyorlar bu sefer. Yani o kısmını da anlatmış olayım. Bunlar hani biraz iletişimle ilgili yetkinlikler artık. Bunlar olmazsa iletişimci olunmaz yetkinlikler. Bir de bir istatistik var bu sene yapılmış. Hangi becerilerin, hangi kullanılan araçların ne kadar arttı? Bakın artırılmış gerçeklik en çok artan yetkinlik olmuş ki artık iletişimde artırılmış gerçeklik olmazsa olmaza doğru gidiyor. Hani teknolojiyle her şey iç içe. Bunları da bakalım. Evet. İşte en sonunda design bu şekilde biraz burada doğru çıkmamış. Bu eğitim kısmını bu şekilde özetlemiş olduk. Hani eğitim kısmında daha çok genel anlamdaki değişimin sürekli olduğunu, hani bunu özetlersek sürekli olduğunu, biz bugüne adapte olmak için en az belirli dersi çok çeşitli alanlardan yetkinlik kazandıracak derslerden seçmemiz gerektiğini söyledik ve bunun da sürekli değişeceğini de anlamış olduk. Yani eğitimle ilgili değişim böyle. Biraz da yönetimle ilgili değişimden, işin kalitesinden bahsetmek isterim. Şimdi şöyle düşünelim. Biz normalde şu bölgede yani değişimle paralel olduğu bölgede hocam bilir hani endüstriciler bu işleri de iyi bilir. Stratejik plan süreçler değil mi? Hedefler falan. Şimdi eskiden değişim olmadığı zaman hatta Türkiye'de de öyledir. 5 yıl hiç değiştirmezsiniz. Stratejik plan yaparsınız. Aslında bu çok yanlış bir şey. Yani bu ne zamanın fikri? İşte bu önceki 2015'lerden öncekinin fikri. Değişim birbirine paralel olduğu zaman siz 5 yıllık plan yaparsınız. Onun işte hedefleri, alt hedefleri, işte stratejileri, sonuçları falan bunu uygularsınız. Niye? Çok az değişir. Ama günümüzde böyle bir plan uygulama şansı var mı? O yüzden günümüzde daha çok politika ve dönüşüm liderliği öne çıkıyor. Yani siz ana yolu sadece belirleyeceksiniz, doğrultuyu. Böyle yan yolları, sokak aralarını falan geliştikçe düzenleyeceksiniz. Ama eskiden ne yapıyorduk? 300 sayfa stratejik plan. Ne yapan anlıyordu, ne uygulayan orada duruyordu. Ama şimdi hani siz yolunuzu ana yol olarak belirleyin. Aslında şu şekil biraz onu da gösteriyor zaten. Yani bu düz yolda giderken bir sorun yok. Ama bu tarafta değişim olduğu zaman bu planlarla değil politikalarla ilerlemek önemli. Bunları böyle anlatayım, böyle karmaşık değil, basit olsun diyoruz. Biraz basitliğe de ben vurgu yapıyorum derken daha ilerlemiyor bu ama böyle kaldı. Sunum ilerlemiyor, onu dayanamadı galiba anlatımıma, o zaman çakıldı. Sunum. Tamam mı? Buradan bir yere bastım.
Hangisine geçmesi lazım? Tamam mı?
Bir önceki, ondan bir öncekinde. Onu da basın geri alırız. Şuradayız. Şurada. Tamam. Şimdi oldu değil mi? Bu da böyle hani karmaşadan böyle basitte gelme. IFQM'i bilirsiniz. Hani IFQM'de Avrupa Kalite Formu'nun bir uygulamasıydı. Şimdi son sene ilk defa eğitimi de işin içine kattılar. Aslında kaliteyi de bunlar da basitleştirdi. IFQM'in önceki modelinde çok farklı bir karmaşık bir yapı vardı. Şimdi gördüğünüz gibi hedefler, uygulama ve sonuçlar. Aslında kalite de bu kadar basit bir şey. Aslında uygulama ve sonuç. Bu ikisine yaptığınızda, sonuca baktığınızda ne olacaktır? Hani bu yeni bir icat da değil. Yani ben hep diyorum, taş devrinde bile bu vardır yani. İnsan bir şey yapar, bu iyi ise daha iyisini yapar, kötüyse değiştirir, başka bir şey yapar. O yüzden burada da mesela günümüzde de böyle kalite konusunda da hani çok karmaşık anlatılır bu, işte kimse anlamasın diye belki de. Aslında kalite, bir hedefiniz varsa bunu yaparsınız, sonucuna bakarsınız. Bu kadar. Biz genellikle hedef koymada ve yapmada çok ustayız. Sonucuna bakmıyoruz. Yani sonucuna bakmada kültürel olarak bir de belki de korkuyoruz, bilmiyoruz sonucundan. Aslında ona baksak biz de bu işi toparlamış oluruz. Yani çok böyle farklı bir şeye gerek yok. Burada da yeni bu kavramlar işte son yıllarda çıktı. VUCA dünyası, işte değişik, kompleks ve karmaşık dünya ile başa çıkmak. İşte bunun da yolu olarak az önce söylediğimiz şeyler var. İşte net ve basit, işte çevik liderlikle ancak bununla başa çıkılabilir. Yoksa eski kafayla, yani eski yönetici modeliyle bunlarla yeni dünya ile başa çıkarılamaz, yönetilemez diye bunu da söyledik. Bu artık plansız olmaz ama planla ilgili, stratejik planla ilgili bir şey. Bu yine hani hep değişim diyoruz ama değişimde hadi gel değişelim diye insanlar değişmez. Büyük bir karşı kitle olur karşınızda. Değişim için basit bir sistem kurmak en önemli iş. Yani dolayısıyla basit bir sistem kurduğunuzda, basitleştirdiğinizde karşı taraftaki kitle, ki bu akademisyenler, direnci hızla azalır. Yoksa siz hadi değişelim, değişin hocalarım dediğinizde kimse değişmez. Bu da bu işin kalitesiyle ilgili, yüksek öğretimde nasıl oluyor derseniz, Aytekin Hocam süremiz de hep 5 dakika diyorsun Aytekin. Bakmıyorsun bence saate. Öyle mi? Geçen de sordum, 5 dakika demiştin. Tamam, peki. Sağ olasın. Şimdi burada da şöyle, üniversitede bu kalite işi nasıl olacak? Biliyorsunuz üniversite dünyaya bakıyor, ülkesine bakar, kendi çevresine, koşullarına bakar, bir misyon belirler. Sonra bir de politika verirler. Eğitimde şunu yapacağız, araştırmada bunu yapacağız diye. Ondan sonra bununla ilgili hedefler koyar. Bu hedefleri, eğitim hedeflerini, araştırma hedeflerini, toplumla paylaşım hedeflerini inceler, gözden geçirir ve bunun performans göstergelerine bakar. Yani bir üniversitede aslında kalite süreci bu aşamalardan oluşur. Şimdi bunu bir üniversite yaptığında ondan sonra kalite ajansı çağırır. Yani üniversite bunları yapmadan bir kalite ajansını çağırmasının hiçbir anlamı yok. Üniversite bunları yapacak. Aslında üniversitelerin bir kalite ajansına dönüşmesi gerekecek. Bunu da benim hep söylediğim bir şey. Daha sonra bunlar çağrılacak. Bunu tekrar göstermişim. Bu da yine stratejiyle ilgili bir cümle. Görüyorsunuz. Savaş için taktik, strateji arasında şey. Bu da evet, bu da ilginç bir şey. Plan yapar ama yumruğu yiyince artık her şey biter. Bu Osmanlı şeyine, Osmanlı tokadı da böyle bir şey herhalde değil mi? Yani karşısında o olur. Bu da benim hani tüm sunumlarda kullandığım, yıllardır kullandığım bir şeydir. Hayat çok basittir ama biz onu karmaşık hale getirmek için uğraşır dururuz diye. Böylece sunumumu tamamladım. Soru varsa hani katkı veya soru birkaç dakikada böyle şey yapabiliriz.
Online ama dinleyicilerimiz de var. Oradan soru gelirse İrfan bir bak istersen.
Yoksa artık
çok teşekkür ederiz.
hiç soru soran yok mu birisi? Çok iyi anlaşıldı mı yani? O yüzden herhalde.
İbrahim Bey'in var.
Buyurun hocam.
Da var.
Peki hocam, sunduğunuz için çok teşekkür ediyorum. Ölçeklerden. Şimdi söylüyorsunuz ya, basitleştirmek lazım, değiştirmek lazım. Özellikle akademisyenler tarafında büyük bir direnç var. Yani bunun bir yöntemi, belki somut bir yöntemi yoktur ama alternatifleri neler olabilir? Hani bunu hep duyuyoruz. Ama bunu yaparsak, şu yolu izlersek biz değişimin önünü açmış oluruz diyebileceğiniz bir formül var mı? Öneri var mı?
Hocam formülden ziyade şöyle, yani üniversitenin üst yöneticileri bir kere bu vizyona sahip olacaklar. Dolayısıyla bu vizyonu uygulama konusunda da araçları az önce söyledim ya, geliştirecekler. Yani bununla ilgili yazılımlar, bununla ilgili eğitimler, bununla ilgili bu işi yukarıda liderlik yapacak kişiler yaptığı zaman aşağıdakinin işi kolaylaşır. Yoksa yukarıdaki üniversite böyle bir sistem kurmaz, böyle bu işe ana yolları çok net olarak açıklamazsa akademisyenlerin baş edeceği bir şey değil bu. O yüzden hani bunun formülü buradan geçiyor zaten. Yani bu tabii liderlik önemli. Zaten az önce anlattığımız sistemde herkes birer lider. Yani rektör yardımcısı, dekan, bölüm başkanı ve hocalar. Dolayısıyla bu prosedürden ziyade bir değişim yönetimi, az önce zaten yönetim mantığında da onu söyledik ya, değişim yöneticisi olan liderlerle bu iş olur ve bu işte zincirin halkaları gibi bunlar. Liyakat ve ehliyet çok önemli. Hangi kademede olursa olsun herkesin liyakatli ve ehliyetli olması lazım. Yoksa zincirin biri şey olsa, zayıf olsa diğer halkaların kuvvetli olmasının çok bir anlamı yok. Buyurun hocam.
Hocam 4-5 yıllık stratejik planların aslında süreçte 5 yıllık stratejik planların süreçte eksik kaldığından bahsettiniz. Aslında kaseti biraz geriye sardığımızda 5 yıl önceki dünya koşullarına bakıp bugüne geldiğimizde arada uçurumu görebiliyoruz. Biraz daha akademik taraftan bakacak olursak 4 yıllık eğitim müfredatları üzerinden konuşuyoruz bizim akademik sistemimiz içerisinde. Ama 4 yılda iletişim tarafında da baktığımızda, diğer alanlarda baktığımızda müthiş bir değişim var. Peki 4 yıllık planlarda, eğitim müfredatlarında bu değişimin uygulanmasını nasıl sağlayabiliriz? Çünkü bağlayıcı unsurlarımız var. Çok hızlı, çok dönüt verilemiyor maalesef. Bir taraftan da direnç noktası akademik tarafta da performans ön plana çıkıyor artık akademik anlamda. Buradaki güncellenme, çünkü karşımızdaki kuşak neredeyse günlük güncelleniyor. Ancak akademik bağlamda da hem ders içerikleri hem eğitmen tarafının buna uyum sağlamasını nasıl değerlendirirsiniz? Nasıl mümkün olabilir mevcut sistemde?
Hocam şöyle, mesela bir öğretim üyesi herhangi bir alanda ne bileyim işte iletişim tasarımı diye bir ders var. Öyle bir ders var mı bilmiyorum ama varsa dünyada bu işi en iyi anlatan hocanın anlattığı dersi anlatma yöntemine ulaşabilir bugün için. Ve kendi de o dersi öyle anlatabilir. Zaten öyle anlattığında yani hocalar değişmezse hiçbir şey değişmez işte. Zaten burada en çok kastettiğim şey bu. Bir kere hocaların değişimi, en çok hoca değişimine daha çok vakit harcamak, daha çok çaba göstermek gerekir. Birincisi bu. İkincisi de staj. Önce söyledim ya, mesela biz şimdi bunu Türkiye'deki bir üniversitede uygulayacağız. Hani az önce gördüğünüz müfredat. Buna mani şu anda bir şey yok. Yani şöyle düşünün, bizde de bir ikisini ben Sakarya'da uygulamıştım. Orada şöyle dediler, işte biz nasıl bunu sayabiliriz diye. Bir öğrencinin kendi kendine öğrendim dediğim bir şeyi nasıl sayabiliriz? Mesela biz İngilizce'de nasıl sınav yapıyoruz, sayıyoruz. İşte bilgisayar biliyorsa onu muaf ediyoruz. Bu da böyle bir şey. Ben işte iletişim tasarımını işte öğrendim online, kendi kendime öğrendim dese ve biliyorsa bu yetkinliği sizin çıktılarınıza sağlıyorsa bunun ne mahsuru var? Öğrensin. Zaten hani 4 yıllık eğitim de artık geçen bir cümle kullanmıştım. Hoşuna gitmişti, burada bir hocamız var. Ece hocam değil mi? Yani üniversitenin aslında duvarları yıkıldı. Ya bu duvarları biz tutuyoruz. Hani kim? YÖK, YÖDAK, YÖKAK, rektörler, işte rektörler ve dekanlar biz tutuyoruz ki bu duvar, aslında bu duvar yıkılmış durumda. Yani bir kişi mesela bu duvar niye hani yıkıldı? Çünkü bu sanayi devrimi bitti. Yani sanayi devriminin bunlar uzantıları. Aslında bu iş 1000 sene önce, 1500 sene önce de böyleymiş. Yani medreselerde mesela icazetname diye bir şey var. Vardı. Siz bilirsiniz. Hani o Avrupa'da da vardır ama Osmanlı medresesini diyeyim. İcazetnamede bir kişi şu konuları bildiği zaman kendisi gidip oradan icazetname alıyormuş. Bu konuları bilen, işte sınavlara girip müderrislerden falan. Şimdi o aynısı şu yetkinlikler mesela. Biz mesela iletişim tasarımı dersi bölümünün mezuniyet yetkinliklerini çok iyi tanımladığımız zaman ve ölçtüğümüz zaman arka planına bakalım. Bunu nereden aldığı, kaç senede aldığı, kimden aldığını bir önemi var mı? Yok. Bugün için bu mümkün mü? Mümkün aslında. Ama ne yapıyoruz? Biz hani sınıfta olsun, gelsin. İşte başka koşullar falan böyle yapıyoruz. O bakımdan yani buralarda bunları düşünerek ilerleyebiliriz. Bunun en iyi yolu nedir biliyor musunuz? Az önce yaptığımız uygulama gibi mesela. Böyle bir şeyi uygularken bir sene sonra görüyorsunuz zaten. Bundan neyi çıkaralım, neyi ekleyelim. Siz yönetirsiniz zaten. O bakımdan baştan hani kesip atmamak lazım. Biraz bu konuda değişim konusunda yöneticilerin cesur olması lazım diyorum. Ve teşekkür ediyorum. Sağ olun.
Muzaffer Hocama yaptığı konuşmadan dolayı çok teşekkür ederiz. Bu arada online katılan izleyicilerimiz de var. Onlara da ben hoş geldiniz diyorum. Also we have online audiences. I'd like to thank all of them for joining us. And now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Douglas Franklin to give his speech. Zafer Hocam, ben öyle bir doktora öğrencileri yetiştiriyorum ki çok güzel sorular soruyorlar size.
Öyle mi?
İlknur benim doktora öğrencim. Tez danışmanı da benim yani. Evet.
This is going to be a problem. Well, good morning. Oh, this is going to be interesting. I've been working with quality assurance for probably about 15 years. My retired position at Ohio University was Assistant Dean for Assessment Planning and Research in the Student Affairs Department. I've conducted a lot of strategic plans. We'll talk a little bit about that. But I've been presenting with ITICAM's group probably for the last 10 years. I trailed my wife to Sakarya University after I retired. thinking that I was going to have a very calm and peaceful retirement in Sakarya, Turkey. I was going to be called what we call in the United States a house mouse. I was going to take care of the house. I was going to just enjoy my retirement peacefully in this lovely town. And then when we went into Teresa's office, there was an empty desk there. And ITICAM said, you should sit at that desk. And I said, why would I sit at that desk? He said, because Dr. Elmas wants to see you. And I said, why would Dr. Elmas want to see me? He says, he's going to put you to work. So I've been working with Dr. Elmas since 2013. I typically follow him in almost all of these presentations. We work many times when we go to do a conference, we'll sit in his office and we'll look at his presentations and he'll ask me about my presentations. I see a lot of my things in his presentations and he'll see a lot of his things in my presentations. So we try to tie these things together. So that's where I kind of got this together, tying things together, looking at all of quality assurance, all of the elements of quality assurance, what's good, what's bad, and maybe how we can do things a little bit better. I always like to start with something a little provocative. So I thought what we'd do is kind of explain what goes on in the VUCA world. Slide is dated. We're now dealing with Gen Y, Gen Z. So if we can't control it, you can only hope to contain it. We used to have a basketball player in the United States, Michael Jordan. I think maybe many people have heard of him. He couldn't be stopped. He could only be hoped to be contained. A sports broadcaster coined this term, and every time that anybody did anything that was outrageous, you couldn't stop it, but you could only hope to contain it. How do we contain the chaos and the complexity in a VUCA world, particularly in higher education? So you kind of have to look at what the following are. I think we have everything up there: science, research, business, law, crime, mysteries, higher education, healthcare, and naval intelligence. To the untrained eye, it would all look like these are disparate, or they might have something together. They all happen to be something that I have spent my life doing. Every one of those things I've had connections with. In particular, and we talk about a VUCA world, I was a naval intelligence officer for 20 years. The military coined the term VUCA because of asymmetrical warfare and a multi-layered or multifaceted battlefield. And so if we've been watching anything in the world today, we see that in particular, the military is a very VUCA world. We don't know where things are coming from. And the job of an intelligence officer is to actually analyze that information. And so what we have here is we try to make sense of things. We try to analyze everything that's going on. I tell the story of my qualitative research professor when I was working on my PhD after my military career. I told her, I said, you know, the difference between higher education research and military intelligence is if you make a mistake, you don't get published. If I make a mistake, people die. That's a pretty big thing. And you don't think about that, but the skills are still the same. The same analysis, the same research, searching for truth, working with a team, collaboration. Those are the things that are going to help whatever you're doing. And in particular, you hope higher education. You need to start thinking about how you collaborate with others and how you teach students to collaborate, because that's what you're going to need in the future. So they all have outcomes. You all want to have positive outcomes of what you're trying to do. Sometimes they're good outcomes. If you're a researcher and you found something and you can publish it and you can get promoted, fantastic. When we start to look at that, we're looking for clarity. We're looking for businesses. My son one time asked my father, who was in businesses, and he had it was incredulous for him to understand why there wasn't more equity in the world. You know, there wasn't more service. And my dad said in his very quiet demeanor, he said, well, Matt, business is about profit and return on investment. It's not about service outside of what you're trying to provide for the customer. So there are other elements within society that provide for that service. And so when we start to look at all of these kind of things, the key thing that you can see a lot of this is clarity. And what that needs is the process then produces evidence. And you intend, when you start to create the planning cycle, you intend to create that evidence. You identify the evidence that you want to collect. Well, don't move. Nobody move. You start to think about the evidence that you want to collect. And so if you go down all of these kind of things, you're looking for proof of what your accomplishments were, or in the particular case of a quality improvement cycle, you're looking for things that may change in order for you to do it better. And so we'll kind of get to that as we go through. My favorite quote in quality is this: quality is never an accident. It's always the result of high intention, sincere effort, intelligent direction, and skillful execution. It represents the wise choice of all alternatives. Now, there's a picture here, and this is a very famous picture of the Great Depression. The person that wrote this was a name named William Foster. He was a dairy salesman. And at that time, they were trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we use our product? How do we develop our product? And his idea was, well, you have better quality. That's how you sell your product. In greater competition, you have a better product. And so what he set this ideal of quality in 1930 that is still used today. It is still the best quote about quality because it strips away all of the external things. And it really identifies what's needed. What's needed to reach quality. Now, the different elements of that from a standpoint of our approach to quality comes out of systems thinking, clarity, evidence, and formative assessment. My guess is those of you that are faculty use this same model. Now, maybe you don't call it these things, but you certainly look for clarity of outcomes. You certainly develop student learning outcomes that you want your students to learn, whether they're course learning outcomes, program learning outcomes, institutional learning outcomes. You want those outcomes to be clear so that everybody understands that, and then they become measurable. You want to have that evidence. And then the concept of formative assessment means that, yes, you might want to look at summative, you might want to look at a particular point in time, but assessment without using it to build in that cycle, pointless. This is no longer a linear world. We don't start something and stop something. This is a circular world. Deming is the father of all quality movements. If you're in business, you know it. You're shaking your head. Deming actually was rejected by American manufacturing after World War II. Because you know what? I'm the biggest, baddest industry in the world because the rest of the world is destroyed. I don't need some statistician to tell me what quality is. I'm America. In America, sometimes we have that attitude. Let's take that same attitude in higher education today. America has the biggest, baddest higher education program in the world. We are supposedly the gold standard, and yet we are not doing things in some cases the way we need to do them because of the VUCA world. If we're static in the way we teach, if we're static in the curriculum that we provide, we are going to fail. And the metaphor I usually use is the dinosaurs didn't see the meteor coming to become extinct. And so we need to change in higher education to deal with these issues on a much faster rate. I always like the Four Musketeers. We're, everybody's in this together. One for one and one for all. That is the world today. If you're teaching in a particular program or course and not seeking out other faculty to infuse or not seeking out in other disciplines, my colleagues have heard me say this dozens of times. The way higher education is built today is built on an industrial revolution model, an assembly model of disciplines. It is not built on an interdisciplinary model. And so when you get your degree, my degree was in physical education. By the time I graduated in 1975 with a degree in physical education, it was a general degree called a hyper degree, health, education, physical education, recreation. I could see a variety of things and I could see how they all fit in together. That was a better model than today. When I was at Ohio University teaching adjunct, I was the assistant dean at the university, but they had me teaching a class. I would go to faculty meetings, and we actually had a faculty member that wanted to have a master's degree in paddlecraft, in watercraft. That is not a sustainable model. That is too specialized for a particular area. There was a previous slide in Dr. Elmas talking about this concept of general education moving to specialization. I would say that that's only partially true. If you don't have a general understanding and general background, then you are going to fail as a specialist. You need to see how that specialty fits into other areas in order to play the game, in order to be successful, in order to operate in a systems thinking world. The guru of systems thinking is Peter Senge in the fifth discipline. This concept that everything is interconnected. So all disciplines are interconnected. I had a discussion with a faculty member at the last meeting that we had. And I said, well, what do you think is the most important thing in society? She said, elementary education, because that's where they learn. I said, oh, no, I don't think so. And she looked at me, with that look of, uh-oh, what's he going to tell me? I said, higher education is the center of everything that happens in society. But it's not as important as elementary ed, because that's where they start. I said, who teaches an elementary ed teacher? Who does teacher preparation? How do you value those different things? Who teaches somebody how to interconnect with another discipline? And so after about 2 or 3 minutes, she kind of looked at me. She said, I see your point. We underestimate higher education. I asked another gentleman that came to my presentation, and he started to tell me that society drives higher education. I said, you're wrong. I should have said, with all due respect, you're wrong. But you're wrong. Higher education drives society. We are the thinkers. We are the doers. We analyze the problems. We create solutions. If we don't, and if we wait, we die. It's as simple as that. So I kind of like to look at the universal systems model. You'll see some similarities here with the Plan, Do, Check Act model, but basically what we're looking for is inputs, processes, outputs, and feedbacks. This is a typical engineering model. It's a systems thinking model. But you can have fun with it. I like to make pizzas. So I thought I would use a pizza to explain this universal systems model. I like pizza. My wife likes pizza. She likes certain things on that pizza. So we collect all the things, all those inputs, we create the pizza. The process is putting all those things together. Do you put the sauce on the bottom? Do you put the cheese on top? Put the mushrooms in there, a little basil, a little spinach. Then you got to make sure that the oven is up to a certain temperature. Put the cheese on the top, put a little bit of oregano on there, and stick it in there. Inputs are done, process is done. What's the output? Output is the pizza being done. The quality of that output is dependent upon Dr. Teresa telling me it's edible, or it's palatable, or it's good. A lot of different things can happen. And I have screwed up on pizzas from the lowest level, and I've been successful at the highest level. And we're constantly trying to figure out, well, did you undercook the temperature? Did you overcook? Did you burn it? Were you watching television and just let it cook too long? And so then we revise it. That's as simple as I can say as far as a universal model. So here we look at the outputs: qualified, successful students, impactful research. That is the desired output that you want. The inputs are faculty, students, facilities, funding, standards, whatever it's going to take you to do what you need to do. The process is actually student engagement, faculty engagement, collaboration, working with each other. And the feedback is you continue to modify, because your output may or may not be successful based on the key result indicator that you want to achieve. So here we see Deming again. We get started by it's not enough to just work hard. You got to know what to work hard on. And so what Deming did is he created this Plan, Do, Check, Act cycle. So if we look at this, we see that you have to have a background of a project. You have to understand the mission and vision and purpose of what you're doing in the first place. You create a strategic plan. Identifying the strategic priorities that are going to come out of that plan. You do the planning and the planning process, and then you align the planning with the assessment. In higher education, we have 3 primary areas that we would look at planning: academics, academic support, or what we call co-curricular activities, and administration and finance. I have yet to have anybody tell me that what they do does not fit into one of those 3 things. Typically, if we look at this, it's a Venn diagram. They are all interconnected at various different levels. It depends on the school that you're in. Some schools have a Venn diagram where the academic and the co-curricular are almost over each other. There's a much larger area. So Using this plan, do, check, act, cycle, you can see the various different elements that go in with each element. The key thing about planning is make sure you know which way you're running. Because you can do all the planning in the world, but if you don't know where you want to go to, anywhere will take you there. There are various different types of planning. Dr. Elma showed you a slide, a couple of slides on planning: strategic planning, tactical planning, outcomes and measures. In the military, we constantly look at a level of planning from a strategic level to a tactical to an operational ground level, and we look at that when we do an assessment. So we can see something from a satellite view, or we can see something from an aircraft view, and then we can look down, and then we see ground truth. Oftentimes, ground truth does not, or tells us that our upper levels of information was false. Strategic planning is a debatable topic. It's not necessarily everybody's cup of tea. It's deliberative, it's fundamental, it guides the organization. It's a way of knowing, and it's tend to help discern how and why. In Turkey, it's required of every institution is to have a strategic plan. And I don't understand Turkish, but I understand strategic plan. So I know you have a strategic plan here. It really defines who we are, where we want to go, how do we get there, how much will it cost, when do we arrive, and how do we know, and who's responsible. Not everybody likes strategic planning. I've been working strategic planning probably for 20 years, both in the military and in my civilian life. And Dr. Teresa and I went to Saudi Arabia one time. We were invited to a university, and I was invited to talk about strategic planning. And so I touted all the wonderful and great things about strategic planning. I went through all the intricacies. And I was followed by my dissertation advisor, who immediately got up and said, strategic plans don't work. And he left it at that. And so, typical of me, I went and analyzed why. Why don't strategic plans work? And he's absolutely right. They don't work if they're not applied correctly. So, I built a strategic plan with and for somebody recently, and it was never implemented. The last two strategic plans that I've done have not been implemented. They were done because somebody told them to do a strategic plan. They took them and they stuck them up on the shelf. The other ones I can actually see change. So not understanding the environment, not having the right people, writing the plan and putting it on the shelf, as I said, partial commitment, unwillingness to change, having the wrong people, ignoring the marketplace. There's a variety of reasons why why the plans fail if you don't work at the plan. Now, Dr. Elmas used this quote: "In preparing battle, I've always found that plans are useless, but planning is indispensable." I've used this quote before, but I found a new one from a movie with The Martian with Matt Damon. And that is, they say no plan survives first contact with implementation. I have to agree. If anybody has not seen this movie, you should see it. Basically, he's a stranded person on Mars because the plan went to hell. And it's then the critical thinking and its ability to bring people together that gets him off the planet. Quality performance, again, we go back to those intention, effort, direction, execution, and choice. And the only way to do that is to actually identify the measurement indicators that we're looking for. In higher education, we look at quality performance as high intention for students and faculty. We look at sincere effort. Remember always that the students are responsible for their learning. All right? You're not responsible for their learning. You're responsible for giving them the tools, to providing the resources, to being there to guide, but they're responsible for their learning. Just like I'm responsible for my learning, and you're responsible for your learning. Skillful execution. A learning outcome is not only what you know, but it's what you're able to do as a result of whatever that treatment was. And then this intelligent design, that's where you're talking about from a faculty standpoint. It's the design of that curriculum. It's the design of those outcomes that create the best performance. And then wise choice. There's lots of ways to do this. I showed Carlos a video the other day about, it's a crazy funny movie called Accepted, but it was a group of students that got together. They were all rejected from colleges, and they created their own college. And they created their own curriculum. And it just drove the regular president of a typical Ivy college crazy because he'd done something different. A wise choice, basically, is a planful execution of learning and learning outcomes. Performance is based on evidence, outcomes, and analysis. So when you perform something, you're constantly looking at what you're doing. You're constantly providing evidence. You're constantly analyzing that. Come back to Deming. And Deming was a data nut. That's what he did. His view, the change from quality before Deming and after Deming, Deming said, why are you wasting your time and your energy and money on a quality assurance program at the end of the cycle? You've wasted money, you've wasted time. Let's look at the data that's provided at the point of contact so that you can catch whatever mistakes are made early. That's the difference between quality assurance that's endemic in a program or an institution or an organization than quality assurance at the end of it, or identified by one agency within your university that everybody thinks, oh, they're our quality guys. They'll take care of quality. No, quality has to be taken care of by everybody in the organization. Always like a good humorist. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of Mark Twain, but Mark Twain basically says before you start collecting the garbage, you better know what to do with it. Same thing as data. You better know what to do with that data. In higher education, we love to collect data, but some of it's useless and some of it's not. So not everything that counts can be counted, and not everything that can be counted counts. I can count the number of students I have. That is everybody's favorite. Can I count what they do in society unless I ask them what they do in society, how well they perform in society? So our measurement, work to achieve an objective, identifies problematic and acceptable situations, respond to policies, and compares current values with reference value. We're starting to look at performance indicators now. Success measures in higher education, we look at retaining students from one year to the next, persistence from the second to third and third to fourth, graduation, because we know that without the graduation, they don't get the bucks. At least in the old model, they don't get the bucks. Now, if they transfer out to move to something different, they can get the bucks if they have the right skill level that's been developed. Where it's difficult is when we look at employment and social and societal contribution. Unless we have a method for students to feed back into the institution, we're not going to know if we've made an impact. I used to hire 500 students, and people would ask me, well, how do you know if you're helping them, if they're learning anything? I said, well, typically they report back after they've gone out and they've got jobs, and we can give you the data on that because we want to know. We're training students on how to work, on how to communicate, on how to collaborate, how to take responsibility. Most of the time we were dealing with 17 and 18-year-old students that had never worked in their life. Definition of a KPI is a performance measure that helps you understand how the organization, department, or institution is performing. It's as simple as that. The similarity between that and a learning outcome or a goal or an objective is the same thing. It's SMART. Specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-based. There are internal indicators that you're looking at how the institution operates. And then there are external indicators. Sometimes these are provided for you. In Turkey, TICA the Higher Education Quality Council, of which I was a member, and helped form with Dr. Elmas, they provide a set of indicators that they want you to try to achieve. And so when you look at that, you have to determine, do you want accreditation through ITICA or not? Or is it some other external accreditation agency? In the United States, we have 6 regional accrediting agencies. We can't operate in the United States without being accredited because the degrees are not worth anything. Performance indicators. In this particular case, this is a U.S. Department of Education site that compares universities based on a set of indicators that they've defined. Not everybody, just like planning, just like strategic planning, not everybody likes performance indicators. This article basically talks about the fact that it doesn't allow for creativity. It's too bureaucratic. There's no evidence that it works. In reality, I'm not exactly sure where they were looking, because there is plenty of evidence that performance indicators work, performance measurements work, both in universities and in businesses. I like this quote. It's an immutable law that words are words, explanations are explanations, promises are promises, but only performance can work. This is particularly important when you're looking at athletics. You can talk a big game, but until you get out on the field and do something, you're just nothing but a big mouth. The same thing happens in higher education. You can say you're the greatest university in the world. You can tout certain things, but until you perform and prove your performance, you're just another name. And that is going to become more and more and more prevalent in what we do. So at the end, you really have to know, did you hit your target? Did you accomplish what you wanted to accomplish? That's the check area. That's the analysis. That's looking at the performance indicators. Did you meet your goals? Sometimes you got to adjust. So you got to look at this through the report. You'll come up with some information that somebody will be able to use, an analysis of that. You'll be able to revise or adjust it. It may be about fine tuning, or it may be about destruction. Maybe what you're doing just doesn't work, and you're going to have to redefine what you do and start from scratch. There's nothing wrong with that. I would argue higher education does not allow people to fail. Fail early and often, folks, because life is tough. I told my students, I tell my son, I tell everybody, if you're gonna live, you're gonna fail. So learn how to deal with it, learn how to learn from it, and move on. Thomas Edison created the light bulb not one time. He failed 999 times. It was on the 1,000th time that he created a light bulb. Fail early and often. So in conclusion, you create the plan, you define the outcomes, you implement certain things, you generate and use evidence, and the quality cycle never ends. That is probably the biggest difference for most administrators and operators. They've come out of a system where you start something and you finish and you just keep on doing the same thing over and over and over again. Here you can't. I like Goth. I think it's easy to act, I think it easy to act is hard, but the hardest thing in the world is to act accordance to your own thinking. In essence, I think Goth would have done really well in the 21st century because he was a thinker, but then he acted upon his thinking. Any questions? Yes, sir.
How do you get the feedback from your graduates after they are out of it?
Typically, it's two ways. One is informal and one is formal. So we have a large alumni association, probably over 100,000 people, many dead, of course, but many alive. There's a survey that goes out every year. What are you doing? We actually have, I have degrees from the University of Arkansas and Ohio University. I belong to both alumni associations, so there's that constant connectivity. I work in both universities. I've worked and done things after graduation, so they kind of know, they kind of ask me those kind of questions. Other things are informal. The areas that I was responsible for at Ohio University, the folks that worked with me continue to have the same connections. I still have the same connections with many of the people that I worked with. Many of us are on LinkedIn. We talk about various things that we learned or that they learned or that I learned from them. So it's that communication. So it's both informal and formal, but it takes effort. It's not one of those things where you can just sit back and go, oh, I don't know anything about where my graduates are. Dr. Teresa gets emails constantly, every day. She knows where her graduates are around the world. She has, I won't even bother to hazard a guess about how many faculty that she's placed in universities around the world. I've placed at least 10 directors of recreation and wellness programs in the United States. I have probably at least 20 people that went on from their master's degrees to PhDs in various things, from exercise physiology to wellness, to mindfulness, to a variety of things. So it's that informal and formal connection that can help you. If you organize it well, you can get it and make change. Anything else? Any other questions? Yes, sir.
I actually found it quite interesting about the idea that you're choosing the military, the Naval Intelligence Service, as an example, and that they coined the term KUVA. When we're looking at militaries in general, there's a very big force against renewing all their equipment and so on. So they're somehow against change, but at the same time they coined this term in planning is kind of ironic.
Yeah. If you look at, and again, because I was in the Navy and I did a lot of, I was primarily during the Soviet time. So I knew more about the Soviet military than I did about my own military. However, if you look at what was going on during the Cold War, there were huge tank forces on either side of the line. And then we found out that most battles would not be tank to tank, massive. If you look at Ukraine today, those battles are not tank to tank. Those battles are asymmetrical, targeted, because the munitions that we have now, you can spend $20 million on a tank, or I can spend $50,000 on a tow missile that will go up and hit it on the top, the most vulnerable part, take the tank out. So now I've got a return on investment issue. $50,000 for tow, $20 million for tank. You'll notice that the West did not send Ukraine tanks. They sent them howitzers so that they could stand back. They sent them shoulder-fired missile systems that were relatively inexpensive. Turkey sent them drones, relatively inexpensive drones that were taking out these massive things. And so this constant movement is what we have to do. That's technology, right? What you saw right there, what you're seeing today, is technology's impact on what used to be a very static situation. Any other questions? Carlos.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Professor, for your brilliant presentation. Very inspiring. And with ample breakthrough for many questions we have. But I have a question.
I knew you would.
Yeah. When we focus to be like runners without a route, or powerful men without causes. We are seeing this all over the world. We are running. Where to? We have power, like the drones, the missiles. Don't forget that they discover, you perhaps you know it, better than I. They discovered this instrument that can just blind the drones.
Right.
And they are there.
So let me first address your question about performance as running without focus.
Yeah.
My dad used to tell me that if you don't have a plan, any road will get you there.
Yeah, that's the same answer.
But the issue is,
I gave to Alice.
but the issue is, my dad had plan up until he couldn't develop a plan. He died at 88 years old after 2 years of congestive heart failure. He had a plan in his life all the way up to year 86. Now, what you have to do is you have to look back at what happens if you just follow the plan. You have to be agile and nimble enough to move from that plan. Performance is a measurement, and it's a fleeting measurement. A runner runs anywhere between 100 meters and a marathon of 26 miles. They're not the same run. They're different runs, but they're measured by their performance. If you don't know where you're going to go, any road will take you there. You have to have a plan about where you want to go, and then you may need to modify it. So that's where agility comes, and that's really where higher education has the greatest problem. Because once we create that strategic plan, once we start building those big buildings, once we start counting on the number of people that come into our institution in order to feed the kitty, we get hamstrung. Our university had an opportunity to pivot more towards a flexible, agile university, and instead they doubled down on a major residential campus and put in $100 million bond, and they borrowed $250 million to rebuild their housing. Now, they decided that was a good idea. And then the pandemic hit, and they couldn't fill any of the buildings, and they couldn't fill any of the housing. So that catastrophic change, what Adriana Kezar calls, there's two types of change, a type 1 change and a type 2 change. Type 1, you can go back. Type 2, you can't. I would argue, did COVID create a type 2 change for us? Is what I showed you in a VUCA world, is that a type 2 change? I think I'm going to let Dr. Teresa continue. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Doc. I appreciate that. Irfan, do we have any online questions? All right. Now I would like to invite Professor Dr. Teresa Franklin to give her speech. Thank you. Irfan, if you have any question online, please let us know, okay? Thank you.
For 2050. Wow.
Okay, we're going to kind of go from the 10,000 foot to maybe 5,000, and then I'll let Susan go down to the ground truth here next. So we're moving through this.
In Turkey, 2000, 71.
2071?
Yeah.
Sorry. Too bad. So we're going to talk about teaching and technology and really looking toward 2050, because as we know, we have to plan ahead. And with the different pandemics and things that occur, the planning is becoming even more important. So as we work through this and discuss this, we're going to talk about issues and trends related to teaching and learning that will actually impact higher education. Hopefully we'll be able to articulate some issues surrounding changing educational environments, and then how you might think about change within your own institution, your courses, or your programs. But I want you to think about this in the fact that quality teaching and learning really comes from professional development, curricular change, execution, assessment, and self-reflection. And I think something that we don't often do enough in higher education is really self-reflection. So we're coming out of this crisis, as we all know, and we've talked about before, and that is, it's really been a crisis kind of all over the place, because it's healthcare and higher education has got some issues. Childcare in the U.S. has been a problem. Climate change is upon us, even though we don't want it to be, and really don't want to deal with it. We have housing issues, K-12 education problems. Economy is, we got high interest rates, high inflation. And of course, we have the crazy politics that surrounds us all. So we kind of have two possible ways to go in this process. We can stay the course and pick up where we left off at the pandemic, or we can take this opportunity really to change higher education. So we can break away from the group and really think about how we can change what we're doing. And so let's talk about the trends that are going to help drive this change in our institution. You've heard some of them with Dr. Franklin, Dr. Doug. And so we're going to kind of move on to the ones that really talk about teaching and learning. So there are really three big areas that are going to impact teaching and learning between now and between 2030 and beyond. And the first one is what we call AI Ed. And this is artificial intelligence in education. And the term that we're kind of cloned there is AI Ed. And it has two parts: learning analytics and learning tools that will be coming into our universities. Some are already there, but they're going to be even more so. The second is differentiated learning experiences. And so that gets us to personalized instruction, emerging learning spaces, micro-credentialing, we've heard a lot about. I'm going to touch on that because there's some interesting things that we need to think about as we micro-credential and begin to use those. The changing role of educators. I don't think we're going to be the way we are right now in the future. And I was a faculty for 20 years. And so I kind of have some perspectives on that, as well as some K-12 issues that are going to impact higher education. And then last is cybersecurity. And really, we haven't had too much discussion about cybersecurity, but that is a critical piece of higher education that we're going to have to deal with. So what really kind of brought about these trends? Well, if you look at the historical cost of computer memory and storage, here we are in 1956 when we have the first, computer chips coming off, all the way over to 2020. And now look at the cost of a USB drive memory. So we really have significant changes in the chip area in which high cost is now low cost. So it's almost disposable. And those are driving the technology because we now can afford to do artificial intelligence when we couldn't in the past. Another reason we can now do artificial intelligence is that, as in when we began to look at computational capacity of our supercomputers, in 1993, we were here, and actually our supercomputer was at Ohio State University, kind of in the middle of the country. And now we are up here at the very top in 2020 of 100 quadrillion capacity in working with this. So we really changed our storage, the ability to store information and to move that information around, because part of our issue is not that we can just store information. We have to be able to store it and then also have space to manipulate it. And that is an issue with artificial intelligence because it has to be able to shift the data very quickly. So you have to have huge capacity in your computers in order to have artificial intelligence. When we look at who is doing artificial intelligence, you can certainly see the impact of COVID, because it was in 2017 and 2019, really higher education was coming into this. Academia was beginning to use artificial intelligence on their campuses more. Then we had COVID appear, and right now industry is taking off. But this is not going to be the case forever, because most of the artificial intelligence work is still coming out of academia. And although it is being, basically sold to the industry or being marketed to industry, it really still remains within the realm of academia. Most people who are working in this particular area, of course, believe that it is going to be the catalyst to transform and impact the survival of universities. And I think to some extent that is true, but I don't think that is a completely true fact. But we'll give the artificial guys their due and let them think about it. So let's talk about higher education in the age of artificial intelligence. And everybody kind of gets a little freaked out about artificial intelligence because they're pretty sure the robots are going to take over the world, but that's not how it works. I'm sorry, just not how it works. There's really only 4 things you need to know about artificial intelligence. And, there's lots of other things, but the general layperson really only knows that 1, it comes from machine learning. 2, it's expert systems that emulate human knowledge, but the only reason they can emulate human knowledge is because they're programmed to do that. Okay, so the programming is their confining boundaries. 3, they do predictive analytics. They take in lots of data that they read by scanning documents, by being placed in there by different computers, exchanging information. And they take that information and try to see what's going to happen in the future. They predict what's going to happen. The final thing is you need to know that they acquire information and new knowledge very rapidly. I mean, think about how long, if you go to the library, y'all have a very beautiful library as you come into this building. If you take out a book and you want to read that book, or you can't take the book out because they won't let you, because they want to be sure they keep it there, and you have to scan pages of it. How long would it take you to scan a 356-page book? Okay, it'd take quite a while. Well, a robot doing that can do it very quickly. And so they can take books, such as the books in Harvard or the books at Salamanca in the library there, or other places around the world, and they can scan them. And now they have that information so much faster than we as humans can do it. So it gives us access to lots of information that we have not had access to before. For example, in the United States, we have different medical research centers. And at these research centers, if a person comes in with a disease that doesn't seem to fit what everybody, kind of the typical disease that a doctor might identify, you can go to these research centers. They will do all the testing, send it to the IBM computer called Watson. Watson will read all that information, plus look at its huge volume of information from medical journals and books from around the world, and will try to help the doctor figure out what is wrong with you. So this is a wonderful application of artificial intelligence because there are so many diseases we don't know that much about, and it would take us years before we could read everything that is needed in order to understand or figure out what's wrong with that person. So artificial intelligence can really do predictive analytics and acquire new information very well that allows them to do that predictive analytics. So when you think about it, these are the following things that artificial intelligence can do. It's very responsive in that it can interact with humans and with other machines to support them. It is also decisive, so it can take information that you give it, and when it's programmed in a certain way, it can actually decide on that information Notice the word programmed a certain way, because programming is actually the key to all of this, okay? And next, it's adaptive, so it can change over time. We have, Amazon has robots that put labels on your package when it comes to you, and that robot puts labels on all day long, forever and ever and ever, 24/7. Oh, you know, that's not something that humans would do well, okay? For one thing, it's so boring and tedious, and it's also would be hard on their hands. And so over time, it would be difficult for them to continue to do this job. But a robot can do that. And then you can take the robot and move it to another area with a different programming chip, and you can actually make it put the packages in the truck. So robots can be very adaptable. You can change their jobs without buying a new robot. You simply change the programming chips. And last, they can be independent. You can let them work all night long doing their thing while you go home and go to sleep. My sister works in a lab where they do genetic splicing, and they have actually a robot system that does that, because that's a very tedious job, and it's one that has to be done all hours of the day in order to replicate and work on different kinds of vaccines. And she's an epidemiologist. And so what happens is she, gives it the information, lets it do its thing all night, comes in the next morning and looks at the printout of what happened with the genetic process. And so will that vaccine work on that genetic sequence or not? So there are a lot of things that robots can really do for us, and that artificial intelligence as part of that robot can help us do. So these are kind of outside the realm of higher education, other than higher education is typically attached to these institutions or these businesses to do this work. For example, my sister is at Colorado State University, where they do the work for the government and help them in gene splicing. So what happens is that as the artificial intelligence is working, it's gathering lots of data. The same thing happens on a college campus. As students sit here looking at their phones, and professors look at their phones, and everybody's looking at their phones to do things, and their laptops, the data is being gathered by the servers on that campus, because every time you change places or you change websites, that leaves a footprint, okay, a digital footprint of where you've been. And so we can take all that data and find out a lot of things. We can find out when you go to lunch. We can find out if you swipe your card. In the United States, we have ID cards. You swipe your ID card in the lunch area. You buy something at the bookstore. You clock into class. We actually use our IDs often to take attendance in our lecture halls. And so all this data can be collected, and we know lots of things about students because of it. So everyone really can interact with your data in some form or fashion, depending on the permissions on the campus. There are really going to be three big areas of use for AI in higher education. The first is institutional, the second is student support, and the last is instructional. So let's look at what artificial intelligence can provide for an institution. First of all, it can help us understand students' behavior. And hopefully, as it gets better and better, it'll be able to anticipate problems before they arise. It can isolate gaps in learning and in programs and in policies, because AI can review and make sure they all align as they should. So year to year, it can look at the data and say, are these policies consistent? Are the students doing these things consistently over time? It can pinpoint specific variables that occur, such do they need financial aid? Are they running out of money at the end of the semester? How can we increase their success? We can also look to see where they are in their grade levels, and where are they finding and succeeding in those particular places. And last, it can make informed decisions and track progress consistently. And that is something that we've had difficulty with in higher education, because we tend to, numbers get away from us, it seems. And so what happens is we have to think about ways that we can be more consistent in collecting the data and confident about the data, that it's good, solid data. and that we can then make decisions from that data. So let's take a look at each area. Institutionally, what's happening in the United States is that we are using analytical systems. And what happens is a student sends clicks on a website at the university, they say they're interested, and from that point on, artificial intelligence begins to work on them, basically. It sends them an email that says, great, we're glad you're interested in our university. It looks like you're interested in majoring in biology. Here are some biology professors you may want to talk to. Here's a link that'll tell you about the biology program. Oh, and by the way, we have a club that has something to do with biology. And so it begins to send you information about all the things that would have to do with your particular major. While it's doing that in the background, it's saying, oh, we had 25 students recently that said they're interested in biology. Are we going to need another faculty member? Because that's 25 students and we have 25 students in our labs only. So now do we need another faculty member? So artificial intelligence is working in the background to begin to decide these kinds of things. And what they do is they develop dashboards that tell us and give us a look at what's going on in the university. So we can take this information, we look at students' media posts, we look at their TikToks, we look at all the things that we can, Facebook in particular, and say, is this the kind of student we want at our institution? I mean, we tell students right up front, clean up your Facebook before you try to apply to the university, because we're not interested in some things. Okay, and so these students, we use artificial intelligence to look at these things. Seton Hall, which is a very a private institution in the United States that's very prestigious, has 80 indicators that they use to check applications coming into their institution. And this is not unusual in the United States, to use these artificial intelligence device software to actually look at the application. Because if you're getting 2,000 applications and you're only going to admit 100 students to a program or 50 students to a program, then you need a way to get through those 2,000 applications. And artificial intelligence is one of the ways that happens. Okay, looking at student support. We use student support software for guidance, just-in-time financial aid, and what we call early warning. So we are using these pieces of software to actually help us see where students are failing or not doing well in a class. We're looking to see if they're staying on path in their coursework. Are they taking the courses the way they should in the sequence they need to? So that it gives educators a much more holistic look at the students' habits and what they're doing, and it helps them find that path through the institution. So I'm going to share with you a sample of a piece of software that it does this sort of thing. Are you getting sound? We're not getting any sound back there, guys.
Your sound plugged in?
Well, I'm on your computer.
It was plugged in.
Is this supposed to be the sound that we should?
It should be. It's typically louder than that. I played it the other day at an institution. It was much louder.
Okay, sorry.
I have another one after this one, so we have to get it fixed. You know, audio is always the most difficult part of working with technology. It never lines or syncs up the way it should.
Today,
there you go.
Faculty and staff. Today, learners, faculty, and staff require more from their institutions than ever before. With Education Cloud, colleges and universities of all sizes can drive learner and institution success from anywhere. Recruitment and admissions, student experience, advancement, and operations teams can use one integrated platform to capture 360-degree views of every learner across the entire education journey. With Education Cloud, institutions benefit from the latest innovations across the Salesforce platform, as well as purpose-built education products and solutions that you can customize and scale to meet evolving needs fast. So let's take a look at how Education Cloud can help you create a student 360, from recruitment and admissions to alumni engagement. Creating a strong first impression with students is key. That's why Education Cloud supports each stage of the recruitment funnel, from prospect to enrollment. Understand your pool of applicants with actionable Tableau dashboards. Then perform targeted campaigns to engage prospective students on the channels they prefer. And with Admissions Connect, your staff can meaningfully engage with applicants and streamline application management all in a single view. Conversational chatbots and tailored communities help applicants get the right support at the right time. And for your staff, keep applicants on track with dynamic checklists and easily review applications with an innovative endless scrolling reader. Once students are admitted, onboarding is a critical step in driving their success. With Student Success Hub, students get access to personalized success plans right from their phones and can easily collaborate on tailored degree plans with their advisors. Then, empower advising teams with features like early alerts and flexible scheduling to support multiple students at scale, all the way through graduation. And streamline student services with a one-stop experience that helps students get answers to their questions quickly, from anywhere. With Education Cloud, your learner data transforms into valuable analytics, helping to drive more meaningful alumni and corporate engagements that make an impact. For administrative operations, your marketing team can deliver personalized communications that build lifelong relationships and trust with stakeholders, all powered by automated journeys in Marketing Cloud. And with Accounting Subledger, you can bridge the financial data in your CRM with finance, ensuring consistent financial insights across teams. With the right digital infrastructure, your institution can transform at scale. Integration capabilities from MuleSoft and enterprise analytics from Tableau shape individual insights.
That was an example of a dashboard.
Institution success. And wherever your staff is working, whether at home or on campus, employees can get help and collaborate from anywhere. Transform learner engagements into lifelong relationships with Education Cloud. Learn more at salesforce.org.
And one of the things you saw in that picture is that they've connected all the pieces of the campus, not just those people who are trying to bring, admissions and then retention, and then also all the financial stuff. All of these things have become integrated. And this is going to happen more and more in order to streamline the cost of doing those activities. There's a free book online. It's called Intelligence Unleashed. If you ask for this PowerPoint presentation, you'll have the link and things to go to it. So you may want to take a look at it at some point in time. But one of the things I wanted to kind of help you understand, if you haven't thought about this, is the fact that with all the computers on campus and the fact that students have to come through your server system in order to do things, you're collecting lots of data. So it's not just when they're sitting in the seats, but it's also when they're off campus working as well. Most institutions are using learning management systems now, like Blackboard or Canvas or maybe Moodle. So you can collect lots of information and begin to look at patterns, relationships, trends, and behaviors so that you can create models to predict and help understand what will make a student successful. So this is a really important piece that's going to be part of this artificial intelligence system in order to really help students move through a learning path. You're going to see more and more discussion about learning paths as opposed to matriculation through college, which is what we've used in the past. Finally, we go to instructional, and you're going to see more self-paced learning, more personalized learning, and some changes in pedagogy, because we're going to see different ways in which we have to deliver content because of the many different models that we're doing. But tracking information on your learning management system is really critical in helping for student success, because you can, if all of your students are having to come into the learning management system, even if it's just to get handouts, then you are getting data of whether they're actually engaging and coming on board. If your faculty are not using the LMS, they should be, because again, you can gather so much information about how they're interacting with the students, which is going to be an important point as we progress toward 2050, is the evaluation of faculty and how faculty work within this environment. So this gives you opportunity to see how students are working, and also a little bit about gives you insights into their mental health, which we're finding that is tripled in the United States with our students, that we have to really spend a lot more time on mental health because of COVID. They felt they were isolated. They're coming back to campus. Some of them are not working well as they've come back to campus. So we have some real mental health issues we need to take care of too. And artificial intelligence can help us do that. They can help us do it by gathering the data so that we know what the trends and patterns are. We're going to be moving into these new learner-centric learning spaces, as I stated. We'll have an opportunity to be face-to-face. We'll have augmented reality, which allows us to do simulations and explore. We'll have augmented virtual reality as well. And then we'll have completely virtual environments. And these are all a mixed reality process that we're going to now begin to see on our campuses. If you've not read the report by Milgram and Crescino, it might be interesting for you to take a look at where they see these different things coming. But I want to share with you just a little bit about total virtual reality, and to talk a little bit about meta, because we're seeing meta more and more and more in the discussions about education. Now, Second Life was the first virtual reality. And so now we've got kind of our new Second Life, which is Meta, which is the name for Facebook now. And they're beginning to kind of divide the Meta world into two parts. Industry, where they are using venture capital to bring in all kinds of businesses where you can take your avatar to the store and buy things. And then they have an educational component that they are working on as well. Do realize that, as in Second Life, all of these things cost money. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. But let's take a look at what they're thinking about the metaverse.
So we're gonna have an astrophysicist in the family. Actually, I have to write this paper. Will you help me? Let's take a closer look. What part of the solar system are we talking about? Saturn. If you were taking astrophysics, you could study in the metaverse. Did you know the brains are made up of billions of icy particles? Really? Look at this. You ready to do that paper now, right? Yeah. In the metaverse, you'll be able to teleport not just to any place, but any time as well. Ancient Rome. Imagine standing on the streets, hearing the sounds, visiting the markets, to get a sense of the rhythm of life over 2,000 years ago. Imagine learning how the Forum was built by actually seeing the Forum get built right in front of you.
Now, it's kind of interesting because in the metaverse, you're going to be able to have an avatar that stays with you all the time. You can change it and everything, but it'll be able to move into the stores and all the different stores and all the different educational communities as a avatar, a single avatar that's your person in a sense. That's a little bit different and kind of interesting. In Second Life, a colleague and I built Ohio University. There was a little team of us. We got together to explore Second Life, and we built Ohio University, and we would hold recruitment days where we would invite all the people who said they were going to apply to Ohio University to come into Second Life, and they could visit the campus and walk around the campus, and some of the buildings we had built out completely and stuff like that. And we would give them T-shirts that said Ohio University and hopes to recruit them. to our university. So it's kind of fun to see metaverse here now, to see how much better the technology is, because one, we have better servers, we have better technology all the way around, and we have kind of a different understanding of how people learn within those environments as well. So, you know, it's coming, whether we embrace it completely because of cost problems that we may see with it is going to be yet to be seen. But I do think there are some potentials for it. But probably right within the next 20 years, the main thing we're going to see is lots of AR, augmented reality, because it really has great advantage for us in distance learning, in classroom teaching, and also in practical skill development. Firefighters are often trained in augmented reality, how to go into houses, how to put out fires, things of that nature. But it's in the medical schools, it's going great guns. We're just seeing lots and lots of use in the medical schools. Also, this is a free app where you can go in and practice surgical techniques if you wanted to. So again, medical application of artificial or augmented reality is strong. We have one for mechanical engineering that allows you to look at all the different pieces of mechanical engineering to work out problems, to design. Again, apps that are out there that work on your cell phone. This one is one for history. In Texas, we have the Alamo, which was a huge battle for Texas. And so we have an opportunity to walk through the city now, but then to also see the city as it was and go through the Alamo, what happened during the Alamo. And these learner-centric environments are actually going to allow students to, they will have on their glasses and the instruction will be within the glasses and help them do hands-on, you know, just-in-time learning with lots of little mentoring pieces that are part of the programming instruction in this as well. And not to, you know, the arts are going to be part of this as well. This is a very popular program in the United States in that you can compose music as well as learn to play the piano. It kind of goes from here's how to play the piano all the way up to composing music. And it's not just happening in higher ed. We have K-12 schools that are doing coding and programming. We have lots of camps, boot camps, summer camps, where students are working with programming and beginning to look at artificial intelligence. If you look at the AR market, the augmented reality market, it's 9.5 billion USD. If you look at the active user devices, it's 810 million. And the glasses that have been sold is 410,000. So it's kind of an interesting market, but it's actually bringing in quite a bit of money. And COVID-19 has taught us that we have to really rethink our systems and how we're going to use these learning content strategies in order to deliver in a wider variety of channels and to different kind of personalized instruction, because student and learner expectations are really changed. And we're going to see that the students are going to want it immediately. Our Gen Zs that are on campus right now are very much about, you know, immediate, we want it immediately. And so the alpha generation, which will be coming on in 2027, that will be when we get our first alpha student, they are even worse, to be honest. They want personalization, they want it to be relevant, and they want it immediately. And so you're going to have some kind of strategy for technology and how you're going to use the technology for learning as these groups come to campus. I said I would say just a little bit about micro-credentialing. They provide some personalized learning, some very special skill things in the United States. They allow employers to verify skills when they come out of college into their workplace, and they can be placed on transcripts just like regular courses. And so this is partnering with industry, and it's all kinds of industry. We have people who have partnered with museums, as well as people who are partnering for programming. Typically, the criteria is they have to be research-based. And so they have learning outcomes. They can be competency-based as well. They have to be experiential in order to be on the transcript. They have to have these criteria. So there is an expectation of content skills and 21st century skills. They need to be shareable. That is, they can be you can transfer the certificate to an industry if they need it. And then they have to be controllable in that we can look at them from the university perspective and see that they meet all the requirements of our curriculum. They go through the same curriculum process that any other course would go through. So in thinking about teaching, I want to take this little video here to give you a chance to look at some different roles of educators that we are beginning to think about.
In 2012, I was asked to speak at a TEDx event in Istanbul on the future of education. Several times throughout my talk, I touched on the topic of teacherless education. After my presentation, I was approached by a Google executive who explained why teacherless education was so important to them. He said their team at Google is looking for ways to educate the people of Africa, but very few teachers actually want to move to Africa. The conversation was brief, but he framed the problem very succinctly. No, most teachers don't want to move to Africa. They also don't want to move to Siberia, to Bangladesh, to Pakistan, or the Amazon rainforest. There are lots of places in the world that teachers don't want to move to. By some counts, we are short 69 million teachers globally, and a full 23% of kids growing up today don't attend any school whatsoever. If we continue to insert a teacher between us and everything we have to learn, we cannot possibly learn fast enough to meet the demands of the future. Teaching requires experts. Teacherless education uses experts to create the material, but doesn't require the expert to be present each time it's presented. Education is now on the verge of a major transformation, and AI-based teacherless education systems are quickly taking center stage. If we apply AI to teacher bots, their primary task will be to find the fastest way to teach students. Over time, AIs will learn every student's interests, their proclivities, their idiosyncrasies, preferred tools, personal reference points, and how to keep them engaged in learning, even in the face of distractions. AI will quickly learn what skills we're proficient in, what skills we're deficient in, and what's needed to bring us up to speed. It will quickly learn how and when to schedule our next training and when we've mastered the topic. Throughout this training curve, individual learning will begin to scale far faster than anything we've dreamed possible. 4 times, 6 times, perhaps even 10 times faster than anything today. Completing a 4-year college degree in 1 to 2 months will be entirely possible with this new form of AI learning systems. By creating high-speed AI learning systems, we remove all of our past limitations. By 2030, the largest company on the internet will be an education-based company that we haven't heard of yet. In my mind, this will be the largest opportunity in the online world where no one has quite cracked the code yet. But once somebody figures it out, it will scale very quickly.
Now, the interesting thing about this group is actually looking into different ways in which this might occur. So as a faculty member, you may actually come to realize that you are the next instructional designer for content that goes all over the world. So it's something to think about. Not sure I agree that can happen as fast as they do, but I think that there are some places where that will have very definite application. So the last piece I want to talk about in the trends is cybersecurity. And that is because cybersecurity is not all just about money being taken from an institution through ransomware, but it's also about the university's reputation. Universities do not want to be seen as the higher ed institution that was hacked. And so we're beginning to see more and more targeted attacks on higher education. In fact, in 2020, higher education institutions were attacked more than businesses. So we're on the radar now. And so I think that we have to think about not just the university's reputation, not just the funding issues behind it, but also the safety of the students, because now all of their data is exposed to the world. And so we've always been vulnerable and just didn't realize it because we're very open and transparent. We let lots of people in. We have lots of people that have information and data there. We have a long history of internet access. The internet was put between universities before it was ever allowed to, the military used it between universities to help do research through the ARPANET. So we've been around a long time, and we don't have very much talent, cyber talent in our universities because, quite frankly, business takes them and pays them more. And we have a large volume of sensitive data. We have students' social security numbers. We have where they live. We have intellectual property that can be stolen by different nations. So really, cyber attacks pose a huge threat to the university. And we're just now beginning to realize how much. And you have to realize that in the United States, we have endowments that are funds that are given to the university by alumni, and they are quite large. I mean, I think, what is it? I want to say Harvard's is what, 400 billion?
44 billion.
44 billion. So, that's a lot of money for a hacker. So we have some key reasons that we're need to deal with, and that is, first, the lack of funding, and as we just don't have the personnel and the resources we need. We have a lot of old legacy systems because we don't give up our technology systems very quickly because we need to replace them and we don't have the money. And faculty tend to keep old equipment around, and I know that I'm guilty of that. I keep around lots of old pieces of equipment. And so it has things on it that really people should not have access to, but it's connected to the internet. COVID-19 made our campuses borderless, and the students often aren't aware of virus protection or the issue of having ransomware software on their machines because they think, well, I'm connected to the university, it should be fine. But most universities now, if you connect, you're checked. But there are still situations around the world where this is not the case. And I actually experienced that in Turkey. So by getting a virus from their internet system at the campus. So I think, we need to really be aware of this. And last, there's this level of trust that has kind of been broken because universities have been very quiet about the fact that they've been hacked. Or by the other token, they say we've been hacked, and then everybody says, oh, well, then you're not a good university to go to. So, there's all these problems that we have that we've got to take care of here, and they need to be taken care of very quickly. So it's really is a time for a change, and these three trends are going to impact that. Higher education is going to be in constant change. And so education reforms requires that we look at the root cause of these problems, not just what's happening seems to be the outcome, but actually the root cause. We're going to also be in constant disruption because COVID is not the last pandemic. And so we're going to have to look at these disruptions and how we can adapt quickly. So there are really four things that we need to think about as we adapt. And one is to look at our curriculum. Which things do we need to streamline? Which ones are no longer useful to the curriculum? Which ones need to be brought on board and updated? How is that curriculum taught? Are we going to do this one always online? Or are we going to have a blended version? Or are we going to only do face-to-face? And then what technology and experiential learning opportunities are we going to have for our students? Are we going to provide technology? We're going to have them buy their own technology? What kind of places will they go and use their technology as part of their learning experience? And then last, whom are we teaching? Because we have these different generations on campus, and it's only going to get worse because we are an aging community around the world. And so older adults are going to begin to want to come back to campus too. So how are we going to make our buildings more accessible? How are we going to help them learn to use the technology that will be used in our classrooms and include them within our community? We really are going to have to transform higher education in order to make these things work and be able to take care of those three trends that we've spoken about today. So I guess my final question is are you ready for this challenge? What can you do to help teaching and learning make this change? Thank you.
I am getting prepared for the revolution.
Oh,
The password for
let me
ARUCAD.
introduce you.
Please do.
Okay, I'm sorry. We have around 60 online organizations. Teresa, thank you. I appreciate that. And Irfan, do we have any online questions? Yok. Oh, Teresa, you got one question. Online question. Nedir?
Yes, we have just one.
Just one, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah. Oh, Irfan, sen, please read the question.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
She said that in US, she said that in US they are using artificial intelligence to select university students. To which extent and that technical efficient when it is known that many young people fake their virtual selves. If they focus only on students' virtual selves, they may let go one of the best students in real life. So for me, face-to-face interaction ought to continue despite the technological developments.
We use the artificial intelligence to basically make sure that they have met the minimum requirements for coming into the institution. We still maintain, we actually go through the applications. We take a select group that we think looks like it meets our requirements. We have long essays they have to write. So those essays are actually read by the faculty or the admission team. Depends. Sometimes what happens is the admission teams read them and then they sort them out to the faculty and then the faculty read them. So it's kind of a process in which the group gets smaller and smaller over time. If you have 100 slots and you have 2,000 students, you need to be sure that everybody's done the minimal requirements for being in the university to begin with. So that takes care of some of them, because some of them won't fill out everything like they're supposed to. They won't have, they may not even have the scores to be in the area that they're going to go into. So then that shrinks the pool. Then the admission team shrinks it again. And then the faculty make the selection. So it's a process depending on where they are in the system. We have one process for undergraduates. We kind of have a little bit different process for graduate students, but we do have artificial intelligence actually check to see, have they done everything? Have they filled out their financial aid forms? Have they sent in all their transcripts? Have they, did the transcript have their rank in their high school? All those kinds of things that are really tedious things that faculty and, quite frankly, admissions officers don't need to be looking at. That takes care of all the requirements that we have to actually enter. And then we have pools that look through the rest of it. I think there was another question in there, but I'm not sure what it was. Does that take care of it? Does that answer that question?
Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Teresa, thank you. Now I would like to invite Susan. This is your turn.
Thank you, ITICAM. Welcome. My name is Dr. Susan Kopp. I am the Director of Instructional Design for the George Washington University. I'm here today to sort of bring you back down to earth a little bit after talking about what we're looking at 50 years from now. I'm here to sort of show you the bumpy road that we're on right now. As director of instructional design, we were really faced with some pretty big problems when we had to take everybody online. And one of the biggest problems that we encountered was this idea of how do we really engage our students when everybody is online, everybody is stranded at home, and how do we really go and bring students into that active classroom? Most of our faculty weren't trained in how to do this. They were used to, having their students looking at them in the classroom. It's a very different feeling when you're online. Surprisingly, most of our faculty now, or our academic staff now, are really much more comfortable in being online and trying to engage students online. So today, really what I wanted to do was to talk about really what some of the strategies are for keeping students engaged online, and for the types of things that you can do in an online environment to keep your students engaged. So by the end of this session, I really hope that we'll all be on the same page about what these engagement indicators are in an online space. That was one of the critical pieces that we needed to do for our faculty, was to really help them understand what engagement meant. We're also going to discuss the relationship between engagement and the community of inquiry. Because there really is a nice relationship there that sort of shows us that idea of engagement takes place both in the face-to-face classroom, and it takes place online, but the community of inquiry sort of helps us tie that together into that online space. We're also going to look at implementing tools and platforms to improve engagement in your course. So we're going to talk about some of the tools that you can use in the classroom to really make your course more engaging. And then we're going to talk about some of the opportunities for engagement that you can bring to your course, as far as the structure of your course and how you're designing it. So we're gonna, as we sort of look to define these indicators of engagement, we're gonna go way back to 1987 and sort of look at some research that was done by Chuckering and Gammon, and they talked a little bit about what they really thought the 7 principles of good practice were in an undergraduate education. And what they said was that in any classroom, whether that's online or face-to-face, we really need to make sure that we're encouraging contacts between students and faculty. And we need to make sure that we're developing reciprocity and cooperation among the students. We need to make sure that we're using active learning techniques. Hoping that my computer comes back, giving prompt feedback, emphasizing time on task. Communicating high expectations and respecting diverse talents and ways of learning. So then that leads us to start looking at talking about what really is engagement. And engagement, I wanted to define it here so that we're all sort of talking about the same thing. But engagement is really the degree of attention, curiosity, interest, optimism, and passion that students show when they're learning and being taught. And there are different types of engagement. You'll see that, there's intellectual engagement, emotional engagement. If students aren't feeling emotionally engaged, it's very difficult for them to do well in a course, even if you're providing them with really great content. There's behavioral engagement, physical engagement, social engagement, and cultural engagement. And so these are the types of engagement, and we really try to bring all of those types of engagement into the classroom. So there are some engagement indicators that we can look at in an online space. And these are also engagement indicators that you could look at in a face-to-face course as well. So we always want to make sure that we're providing an academic challenge for our students. We want to make sure that they have higher order thinking, that they have reflective and integrative thinking, that they are using learning strategies, and that they really have quantitative thinking and quantitative reasoning skills. We also want to make sure that they're learning with their peers, and that they're using collaborative learning, that they're using discussing things with their class. We want to make sure that they're experiencing things with their academic staff, that they're actually engaging with the academic staff, and making sure that student and academic staff interactions are taking place throughout the entire class, and that we have effective teaching skills, teaching practices. Once again, we're also looking at that real environment, and this becomes very important in online, and making sure that there are quality interactions and making sure that we have a supportive environment for the students. So that sort of brings us to this idea of community of inquiry, and really how we make this online space a great educational experience for our students. And this is a sort of a theoretical template of looking at how you can really make an online space a great educational experience. So you need to make sure that you have that cognitive presence there with the information and materials that the students are learning in the course. You need to make sure that you have the teaching presence where the faculty member or the academic staff are choosing that content, and they're making sure that they're setting the climate for the course. And finally, we need to make sure that we have that social presence, which I think is really, really important, because this allows us to actually support the discourse about that cognitive presence, and it allows us to really interact with one another and to learn from one another as we move along. So this actually is looking at those engagement indicators and how the relationship between those engagement indicators and the community of inquiry framework. So we have certainly here, you see that we have for an engagement indicator, which completely relates to that cognitive presence. We have the academic challenge. We have for teaching presence, we have the engagement indicators of experiences with instructors and that supportive environment. And we have the engagement indicator of learning with peers for that social presence. So this is sort of the relationship between the two. And this really brings us to how we bring engagement into that online space. So now we're going to take some of those engagement indicators, and we're actually going to look at what kinds of tools we can use, and talk a little bit about each one of these indicators and how we can bring those into our courses. So we'll start off by looking at academic challenge. Within academic challenge, we have higher order thinking skills, we have learning strategies, quantitative reasoning, and relative and integrative thinking. So looking at higher order thinking skills, we really want to make sure that students are using the idea of application, analysis, judgment, and synthesis. We want students to be able to learn by engaging in direct application of skills, theories, and models. We want to make sure that they're able to actually do analysis and to provide explanation, evaluation, and clarification of a collection of evidence. We want to make sure that they can actually make good judgments and make good decisions based on the facts and to form sensible conclusions. And then finally, we want them to be able to really be able to synthesize all of the information that they've learned from multiple sources, and to be able to take that information and move it together to create cohesive skills and knowledge. When we look at reflective and integrative learning, we want to make sure that we're really providing those opportunities for students to make personal connections with the course material. And this is something I think that it's easy to forget as academic staff. It's easy to forget, that these are human beings in our class, and we really do need to meet them sort of where they're at. And learning activities that make connections between real world events and the course content can be very, very helpful in keeping students engaged and really bringing relevance to the course content in their course. Opportunities to review the strengths and weaknesses of a topic or issue can also be a great way for students to really explore a topic a little bit more in depth and to really bring that reflective and integrative learning in. Also, being able to view a topic from a different perspective. We find this to be such a great tool, not only for students to do that reflective and integrative thinking, but to maybe start to understand something from another side, another viewpoint, and to actually maybe be more accepting of those viewpoints moving forward. In looking at learning strategies, the importance here is to be able to implement effective learning strategies that enhance learning and retention. We want to make sure that we're really encouraging those effective learning strategies, making sure that students know how to, take notes, how to do the readings, how to keep journals to really be able to summarize what they're learning. This doesn't always come naturally to students, and so sometimes I think it's very, very helpful. They often think that if they're sitting in their classroom with their notebook, that they're taking notes and that it's all going to come together for them when they take the final exam. So sometimes really teaching them that they do need to be able to summarize and giving them opportunities to summarize in different ways through journals or blogs can be very helpful. Self-assessment is another really important piece. Students aren't always great at just being given a textbook and saying you have an exam in a week. Study your textbook. Make sure that you know what you need to know. So having that self-assessment there, providing opportunities for them to use flashcards, for them to take ungraded quizzes, to really just sort of check themselves every week to make sure that they're learning the content that they need to know, is very helpful when they get to that midterm 6 weeks out, 7 weeks out, because then they're going to be able to really be able to do the kind of, quality work and have the understanding because they're scaffolding, they're building each week. Also, making sure that we provide opportunities for review sessions. This is very important in an online course. Review sessions can really, with the class, can really give I think, academic staff the better idea of sort of where students are at, where they may be struggling, where they may not do well on a midterm or a final. So not only is it really helpful for the students to particularly be able to review with the academic staff and to review with other class members to sort of check their own knowledge, but it can also be very informative for academic staff as well. Peer review sessions can be great. Sometimes it's a little daunting to be in front of your instructor and being afraid that you might not know what you're talking about. But as peers at a peer review session, you can really kind of use each other's, knowledge and sort of build upon that. And it's a little bit less of a formal environment. So those can also be really helpful, particularly in online. Quantitative reasoning, we're seeing this particularly at my university, probably at every university in the world. There's just so much data out there, as Dr. Teresa's been talking about, Dr. Doug talked about. There's just so much data out there right now. But we want to make sure that within our classrooms that students are actually able to develop quantitative reading skills to evaluate, support, critique, and understand numerical and statistical information. we want to make sure that not only can they look at statistical information, but that they can reach conclusions based upon the analysis of numerical information. And we want to make sure that they can examine real world problems and issues using numerical information. You don't necessarily want to rely on Fox News or some other, news group to tell you what that data means. You want to be able to look at the data and understand how to use it. Also, evaluating conclusions for numerical data is I think, a really important piece. Students should be able to read research articles in their fields and be able to look at that data and reach conclusions about that data. So now we've talked about academic challenge, and we've looked at some of the pieces of the academic challenge indicator. And I wanted to sort of talk about some of the tools that we're using today. Certainly there are going to be a lot more tools 50 years from now to use, but these are some of the tools that we're using today to make sure that we're really just, making sure that we're providing opportunities to use these different kinds of skills. So we want to make sure that we're using discussion boards and synchronous sessions and simulations, case studies, projects, experiential learning opportunities. I want to say a little bit about experiential learning opportunities. We have increased our experiential learning opportunities. I think probably doubled them over the last 5 years. At my institution, we're partnering with, just recently, we did one with DHL. We've done one with eBay recently. We're actually partnering with companies outside of the university community and working on projects with them. We just sent a group of students to Sweden to work with sustainability companies over in Sweden to do an experiential learning course on sustainability and marketing. And these are opportunities for students to really use those skills that they're getting in that academic and part of the course, and to really be able to apply those higher level thinking skills, to be able to really apply the learning strategies that they've used, and to really be able to use the quantitative reasoning and the reflective and integrative thinking skills. And they can take all of that put together and use those experiential learning spaces for that. So the next indicator that we're going to look at is learning with peers. And learning with peers is pretty important, particularly in online. I think that, this is the piece of online that oftentimes is missing when the pandemic first hit and we all had to go online. I think that was the point we drove home as strongly as we possibly could to faculty, because it was, the piece that they weren't thinking about. They were so worried about making sure that they could get the content to the students that they forgot about the idea that a lot of our students are, really collaborative learners, and that they missed being in the classroom. And so there are definitely ways to provide collaborative learning in a course. And I think it's important to discuss this a little bit. So when we talk about collaborative learning, we're looking at collaboration where learners can work together toward a common goal. Students love to learn this way. Student-centered instruction really tends to increase the relevance and to build self-esteem. Opportunities for students to interact throughout the course and improve relationships and foster trust. This really works well when we start to, if we really are using collaborative learning from the very beginning of the course, students are much more likely to be able to have success when they're working in group projects and things like that, because they have built those relationships and they have built that trust, and that takes a little bit of time. So you really have to start this from the very beginning of the course. opportunities for students to develop interpersonal and small group skills, and also opportunities for group collaboration and problem solving. All of these things really allow students to become much more collaborative in that online space. DE&I principles. This is something that at my institution, we're spending a lot of time doing. I think we realized that we have some weaknesses in this area, and we're working hard to make sure that we are really looking at diversity, equity, and inclusion in our courses. We want to make sure that our courses reflect a diverse society and world. We want to make sure that the syllabus sets a tone for diversity and inclusion. It's really important to begin the course with student introduction activities that allow them to talk about, their interests and what their preferred name is. I really don't like being called Sue. And the second somebody calls me Sue, my name is Susan, and the second somebody calls me Sue, I feel very uncomfortable. So, I hope that, if I'm in a classroom, I would never want to make somebody as uncomfortable as I feel when I get called by a name that isn't really my name. So using inclusive language, setting expectations for valuing others' viewpoints, and ensuring accessibility of text and multimedia. These are all things that we can do to really make sure that we're addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in our classroom. So there are some suggested platforms, once again, for addressing diversity, equity, and inclusion in the classroom, and for really making sure that we're providing a collaborative learning space with peers. Also, obviously, discussion forums are great places where students can interact with one another asynchronously. Synchronous sessions are a great opportunity for students to get together and work. I love discussion forums in the sense that they give students, I think, an opportunity to think a little bit more than they maybe have in a synchronous session. And I think that going back to diversity, equity, and inclusion, we're making sure that we're including students within the discussion forum that may not be able to participate as much in a synchronous session. They may be English as a second language. They may, just not be as comfortable participating in those types of environments. So sometimes the discussion forum really lets a student shine and to really take the time to have some great discussion with other students in the class. Simulations are a great way for collaborative learning. We have a few simulations in some of our courses. We have one where the students actually run a stock portfolio for the entire semester. And this is great, except for the fact that it really does require, it gets very intense for the students. And if they're losing a lot of money, there can be some definite, pull and push with the students not wanting to make certain choices. And so they need to learn to work together for one common goal. And this is an excellent way for them to learn how to do that sort of collaborative learning that they're going to have to do when they get out into the real world. Group projects, another great way to sort of promote that collaborative learning. Our academic staff are a little uncomfortable doing group projects oftentimes, and we've really tried to encourage them to ask the students from the very beginning to start collaborating in the course together so that they can develop those relationships and that trust. And then when they get to the group project, things seem to go a little bit smoother. Experiential learning opportunities, once again, can be a great way for students to actually get out there and do some real world things with the content that they're learning in the course. So next we're going to look at the next indicator for engagement is experiences with the instructor. So if we're not yet talking about that teacherless society, because at least in our online space, the student instructor interaction is pretty important. And I think critical to the students really doing well in the course. We're also going to look at effective teaching practices here within student instructors. So student instructor interaction, it really positively influences the student cognitive growth, development, and persistence. And becoming involved in subject matter related groups and committees outside of the classroom is one way that academic staff can kind of engage with students in a way that is outside of the classroom, but to show that, yes, they have common interests to the students and to bring some of their knowledge and expertise into some of those groups. We've tried to form a lot more online groups and committees since COVID. And I think that when academic staff become involved in those, we see a lot more engagement with the students. So if you can become involved in a group or a committee as an instructor that's outside of your course, I think that can be really helpful. Also, making sure that you're modeling intellectual work and promoting the mastery and knowledge of the skills to your interactions with students can be very helpful. I loved it when I was in school and my faculty talked about the research that they were doing. And sometimes they even let us participate in some of the research that they were doing. And that was some of the most exciting stuff that I got to do in school. So that's also a really important way to build those student-instructor interactions. Encouraging students to attend one-on-one office hours can be so great. I also had just some really great faculty members when I was in school, and oftentimes we had to, as part of the course, attend at least one-on-one office hour with our faculty or with our academic staff, and it was great. And so we have asked our faculty at my institution to actually consider offering office hours and asking each student to attend those office hours. And those academic staff that have taken us up on that idea have actually had their office hours filled much more often with students coming back again because they've had additional questions and feel more comfortable working with that academic staff member or instructor. Participating in asynchronous and synchronous class discussions is also really helpful. I had Dr. Teresa as one of my faculty members, and she always joined our discussion groups, and our discussion groups were so much better because of it. We encourage our academic staff at GW to do that as well, and I think that they have found that their discussion forums work much better when they can join them. The same with synchronous sessions. If you can join the breakout groups, also really helpful for students. So some suggested tools and platforms for this, maybe that we haven't already talked about. Simulations, you can also add some JIT or just-in-time tips by the instructors, so that when students get into a simulation, what happens sometimes is that they get stuck. They're not sure where to go. They're not sure what the best choice is. And often our instructors and academic staff have a much better idea of sort of where students are going to get stuck. They can almost predict it. And so we've actually recorded some little videos where we know that the student may get stuck, that they can play if they hit a roadblock in a simulation. And that seems to really sort of help them move forward. And it gives them this sort of tie with their instructor, that their instructor, even though they're in an outside simulation, their instructor is still there watching over them and knows what they're doing. So also making sure that you're using your LMS is a really important thing. I think that when we talk about effective teaching practices, one of the things we want to do is we want to make sure that we're using an LMS and we're grading within the LMS, and we're providing students with that real-time feedback. They're sitting and waiting for their grades. They really want to know how they did. So making sure that we're using those types of tools within the LMS is really helpful. Making sure that you use multimedia and other types of resources to provide multiple explanations for things can also be a really effective teaching practice. We use a lot of animation in our courses. So if we have a difficult topic or a difficult theory, we will often animate a little video that sort of explains a process quickly. And it's really surprising that, you know, the students can read about something in a textbook, and by watching a little video, they have a much better understanding of it. So just explaining it in a different way, using a different tool to explain it can be really helpful. So finally, we're going to talk about that ever important classroom environment. And the classroom environment is a tough place in online. It can feel very lonely, and it can feel very isolated. But I think that there are things that we can do to make sure that doesn't happen, and that students really do feel supported. So the quality of interactions and really creating opportunities for those to take place between the students and the staff is very important. So, you know, we've talked a little bit about the, student academic staff relationship, but it's really important that it all comes together, and that everybody is interacting in quality ways. So we want to make sure that course activities create opportunities for students to interact with their peers, and to make sure that they're interacting with the academic staff in really positive ways. Scheduled synchronous sessions can be very, very helpful. And if they're facilitated through video conferencing platforms, they can really improve peer and academic staff interactions. Doing things like breakout sessions and polling can be great ways of getting students to talk. I have one faculty member that as soon as students start not talking, he starts implementing polls. And if the students aren't, the students have to respond to the polls, because he won't end the poll until they do. And he knows who's not responding. So then from there, if, he'll get more controversial. If people still aren't talking, he'll get more controversial with his polls as he goes along. And it's kind of gotten to be just a joke, please stop before we get some, really controversial poll that we all have to talk about. So these are great ways of just bringing classrooms together. Breakout rooms are also a great place for students to get to know each other on a smaller scale. Messaging platforms are something that we're using a lot of these days. So Slack, WhatsApp, Microsoft Teams. These give students and instructors or academic staff places to just sort of shoot off a question, to ask a quick clarification on something. It's just we're living in that type of world now where we want instant information, and these messaging platforms are a great way to get it. So we also want to make sure that we've got a supportive environment that assists students in succeeding in the classroom and fosters engagement. So we want to provide support when needed to help students succeed academically. We want to give them images and PDFs and infographics that are formatted in a way that they can use an accessibility tool to consume those pieces. We also want to make sure that multimedia is captioned and transcripts are provided. This is a lot of work, but it's, I think, really critical for students to be able to access all of the information in the course. Making students aware of learning support services across campus, I think, is another thing that we should really make sure we do in a supportive environment. We want to make sure that we can't do everything as instructors or academic staff. So we want to make sure that we are providing the information that students need for additional tutoring, for the Writing Center, for disability support services, and that all of that information is readily available in the syllabus or in the course in an easy place for them to find it. Also, encouraging diverse teams and opportunities for students to work together from different backgrounds, I think is another important thing that really makes that supportive environment. We have a lot of students that at GW that like to work with their friends in teams. And we've tried to really discourage that. And we had one situation a little while ago where the students were actually building a company. So they were, creating the plan for starting a company. And, the idea was that all the finance people were going to get together and they were going to do it because they thought, we're going to do such a great job, because we know all about finance, and all of the data analytics people were going to get together, and they were, because they're all friends, and they were going to do the same thing. And so when the instructor came in and said, okay, I'm going to create the groups for you. And she put one finance person and one data analytics person and one marketing person on each team. And they had all the resources that they needed to really put together this great company. And I think they started to see that maybe you don't always want to work with your friends, because other people can bring some great knowledge to the team if they're from a diverse background from yours. So looking at quality interactions, there are lots of tools that we can use to provide those. As I mentioned, Zoom, Collaborate, and WebEx are big ones for synchronous platforms right now. These conferencing platforms have, I think, really been a huge game changer in really being able to take an online course and make it feel a lot more engaging. Breakout sessions within those synchronous platforms can also help students interact at a smaller scale. Use of polling, messaging platforms, as I mentioned, like Slack and WhatsApp. Shared documents can be really, really fun in an online course. We use a lot of shared documents in our courses. Microsoft Teams and Google Docs both have options for that type of thing. We also use a lot of shared spreadsheets and Google Forms to look at data. Supportive environments, I think that, making sure that you're using tools like an accessibility checker in your LMS can help you make sure that everything in your course is accessible for all students. We're using Blackboard, and so we have Ally embedded into our Blackboard for accessibility. And I think it's been very, very helpful for an instructor to see that little red flag up there that says maybe something isn't going to be accessible for all of the students in the course. And then they can get that fixed. Also, student policies and resource links can really sort of help with that supportive environment. Students know that if they need something, that there's a resource there for them. Particularly in an online course, that I think can be very, very, very, very helpful, because it can feel pretty isolating being online. Also, links to academic support, as I mentioned, tutoring, Writing Center, disability support services, and then student interest surveys to inform the creating of diverse groups can be really helpful too. So if you have your students fill out a student interest survey at the beginning of the course, you oftentimes have a really, really nice slice of a picture of that student and sort of what they're bringing into the course. And it can not only help inform what you teach and how you teach, but also how you set up groups and to really help you create that supportive environment. So that's pretty much it. We've looked at these 4 indicators of engagement. We've looked at academic challenge, learning with peers, experiences with the instructor, and that classroom environment. And I think that when we can take all of these pieces, all of these indicators, and put them together into an online course, I know it seems daunting, but a lot of it is really just, designing your course carefully, thinking about how you're presenting your content, and maybe taking a look at these indicators and just double checking to make sure that you're really meeting these kinds of needs to bring engagement into the course. So I have my PowerPoint here. It's available. I have my citations in there with links if you'd like to look at anything further. My email is secop@gwu.edu. Please email me if you would like a copy of the presentation or if you have any questions, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that anybody might have down.
There is a question from online.
Okay.
Can you explain the quantitative thinking? Can you explain a little bit quantitative thinking?
Sure. So when we look at course content now, particularly these days, a lot of the course content that we get will have a lot of statistics in it. It will have a lot of data in it. And data is kind of what's driving the world right now. So when we get students in a course, it's important to make sure that they're not just taking however somebody else analyzes that data, that they can actually look at that data and make decisions for themselves, and to actually look at what that data might mean and interpret it in ways that are relevant to what they're trying to answer. So data can be interpreted in so many different ways that it takes a lot of practice to be able to start looking at all of the data that we're presented with on a daily basis, and to be able to make good decisions about what that data really means. So practicing that in courses, I think, is a very important piece of that real world, what I need to do when I'm in the real world. And that does help with engagement quite a bit. There's a purpose for being in the class, and that purpose is probably that you're going to go out and do something with what you've learned. So, being able to practice that interpretation of data and the quantitative skills that you develop in doing that is really important. Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much.
Susan, thank you.
Thank you.
Do you remember how you discovered the world around you? Can you hear the beat of life? Can you hear it by seeing it and feeling with all your senses? Hey, can you still hear it? There's something in you, driving you, calling you. Calling you in closer and closer. It's happening right now. Time to free your curiosity that's always in you. Now it's time to act. This is an act of discovery. It requires looking to the world in new ways. much to answer for, but we're not offering you the answers. We are here to encourage your questions, but more important than the question is how you answer it. Try the ordinary, then try the unusual. To live is learn, and to learn is to live. Live, learn. It's an endless process. This is your path. This is your journey. You decide how it's going to be. Just enjoy every moment of it. We believe in design, keeping it simple but also significant. We believe in art for looking at the world with a unique perspective. We believe in creativity for communicating better with the world. Creativity takes courage. The future belongs to the curious. Come and experience it with us in ARUCAD and discover your creative potential.